I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly and begin with a roll call. Madam Clerk?
Here. Mr. Coffey is here. Ms. Gray Jackson? Honored to be here. Dr. Saul Craig? Here. Mr. Starr?
Here.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Here.
Mr. Birch?
Here.
Ms. Drummond? Here. Ms. Osiander?
Here.
Ms. Johnston? Here. Mr. Flynn? Mr. Clayman? Here. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Very good. Ms. Drummond, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, ma'am. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. The first order of business is AO 116. This is the 2010 General Government Operating Budget. And we have a motion on the floor that has been amended. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I'd like to move to substitute AO 116 with the S1 version.
That item is before us. Is there discussion on substitution? Is there objection to substitution? All right, discussion on substitution. I'm sorry, just a minute. Ms. Johnson, do you want to discuss it first?
I'll come in later. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Clayman.
Well, you get to answer my question. So as the mover, there were a number of amendments made to 116, and my question is the intent, and is there the intent that all the amendments that have been previously moved will be moved in mass? Most the amendments that have been moved and approved, will they be moved in mass and added to the S1?
Could I respond?
I'll have to have anybody respond.
Thank you. My sense is, since there is a substitute version, those amendments will have to be moved again. But I would be more than amenable and actually happy if someone would move them in mass. It should simplify our meeting.
Well, I would like to hear from other members of the body. I am supportive of making the move to the S1 so long as we are going to add all of the amendments that have already been added to the S1. And if there's resistance to adding the previously added amendment, then I think we should just proceed with the existing version of the budget and work to amend that.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Several amendments to the original budget were passed. Some of those, I believe, were incorporated in the S version. I don't know where they sit in the S1 version, if they're actually incorporated or not. I just got it about a half an hour ago, so I haven't seen it yet. I'd like to, if we could get some sort of accounting of the differences between the original, the S, and the S1, I think that would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I would also refer you to the last page of the S1, and hopefully there's copies for the public over there on the counter. But if either Mr. Flynn or Ms. Johnson would like to summarize some of the changes and inclusions in the S1, that would probably be helpful at this time. Would that be all right, Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Either one of you?
It would be right to light, Madam Chair.
Mr. Flynn.
All right. On page 1 of 1, which is the summary on the back of your S1 version, if you would start at line 9, we'll go with the changes. Please note the $16,000 deduction in what we had originally designated to community grants in the S1 version. That was additive in the S version. And then another $9,000 out of the community grants program on line 10. Those two will be combined for a total of $25,000 to support the Northeast Community Center. That's the Boys and Girls Club service that's available in East Anchorage. And that is encapsulated in line 11. You'll see, beyond that, you'll see a series of deductions, lines 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18, Those total $75,000 reductions sort of throughout the municipal budget, and are offset by a $75,000 increase in the library materials budget. That's line 19. If there are any questions about the specifics of those reductions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Mr. Gutierrez, did you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention one more thing. I apologize. Also encapsulated in here, I hope, I don't see it here on the back, but there is a $65,000 reduction for the minutes clerk position in the clerk's office, and $30,000 in new money, plus that $65,000 to provide $95,000 in total support for the Federation of Community Councils.
So in terms of the amendments that were passed at our last meeting, or rather 2 meetings ago, which of those, and I'm looking at the sheet that was handed to us, combined assembly members' proposed amendments to the 2010 general government operating budget, and the clerk has on the first page listed what action there was.
Yeah, I have that.
So, for example, let's just take the first 6. It looks like these are amendments that are passed. Are these incorporated in the S1?
What we have thus far, Mr. Gutierrez, amendment number 1 is the FCC money. That's at $98,000.
Okay.
We have a different fund source for that.
But the money is
slightly different, and a slightly different level. It's a $3,000 difference, but so it's mostly incorporated.
Okay.
We'll call it that. Number 3 is not. As you see, number 2 failed. Number 4 is not. Number 5, which is the DEEP program, is not. The library amendment at $600,000 is not incorporated. It's incorporated at $75,000 for materials only. And then I don't think. Oh, the only other one is. We haven't acted on that one. The only one that we acted on is number 14, the public transportation elimination of the fare increase, and that is incorporated into your S1 version.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Gray Jackson. This is on the motion to substitute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I almost forgot what my question was, but that's all right. That's all right. But my question is, I would really like a legal opinion as far as whether or not when the S1 is substituted that these amendments that pass just drop. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you wanting that from both Mr. Wheeler and Ms. Tucker? Is that Mrs.
Well, there are a couple of attorneys in this room right now, right? Thank you.
It's a process.
All right. Could the administration respond and then Ms. Tucker respond, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, they're conferring.
All right.
Not all of them. Confusing.
Patience, man. Patience. Through the chair, assembly members, my understanding is that you're talking about the amendments that were passed when you last took up the original budget proposal.
Yes, sir.
All right. The motion made by Assemblymember Johnston to move S1 as a substitute would replace completely not only the original AO, but any amendments to it that were passed and approved. So
Thank you.
if it's the intention of the body to include these amendments in S1, you'd have to move it.
Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson, you still have the floor.
I'm done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Mr. Coffey.
I think Mr. Klayman asked the right question. Do we want to incorporate the amendments previously made to the original version in singly or in mass? And I don't have an answer for it, but it would, if you put them in, then the issue of what we had previously passed would then be included in the S1 version. If we don't, they won't. So we need to know whether or not on the next motion, which would be the next motion, whether we want to do them singularly and redebate them, or in mass and not redebate them, or not at all. Thank you.
And my question for you, Mr. Coffey, would be, would you support a vote to incorporate them in mass?
Would I support a vote to incorporate them in mass? Yes.
Well, at this
There's
point,
not a motion.
No, I'm going to rule that out of order. The motion on the floor is to substitute. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see Mr. Coffey's point and adding these amendments in mass, but I think it would make more sense to add the amendments that already passed en masse, and then the individual amendments by individual assembly members can be brought to the floor during the process? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on substitution? Is there objection to substitution? Hearing and seeing no objection, the substitution is approved unanimously. Not approved, excuse me. I spoke too quickly, Mr. Gutierrez. The chair stands corrected. The vote was approved, but the S1 version is before us. So, Mr. Klayman, you're first in queue.
I would now move to incorporate the previously passed amendments to the original version of the budget to the S1 version.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Some of them are incorporated, Mr. Klayman. That's the one problem with doing an en masse.
Mr. Coffey, I was about to say that. We need a little bit of clarification.
Well,
for instance,
I think I can give you the clarification.
All right.
The point would be where an amendment has been incorporated already. For example, Federation of Community Councils. If the S version, and I didn't quite follow the dollar figures, but if the S1 version funds Federation of Community Councils at
$3,000 less.
$95,000, and what we approved as amendment was $98,000. Then by voting for this, it would put it up to $98,000, but I fully recognize that the mayor has the line item veto authority to knock the 3 out in the future, but for purposes of our discussion, I want them to be up to the level that they were passed when we acted on them the first time around. Because I don't want to try to go back through each one individually and try to do all the math. I anticipate that Ms. Frasco and others can track it effectively and indicate where it puts
All right, just so I understand the motion that you made. Basically, you're moving all of the amendments that we passed and approved last time be incorporated in.
Right.
Now,
so that they are effectively at the level that they were approved in the last time.
All right, so Ben, basically this amendment, for instance, would increase the funding for the Federation of Community Councils by $3,000.
And it would increase the library funding by $525,000. If my reading is correct, that the S1 has libraries at $75,000.
All right, I think we need real clarity on what amendments passed, and I appreciate this sheet.
Then I'll go through the sheet.
Could you just list them so everybody is on the same page?
Sure. On amendment number 1, which has to do with Federation of Community Councils, which was $98,000, that would mean that the S1 would be amended. By voting for this motion, it would increase the S1 by $3,000, as I understand it. The next one that has been voted on was the fire inspector, which was $120,000. I don't believe that's in the S1, so that would add the fire inspector in at $120,000, or $1,020,124. The next one would be library at $600, because the S1, I believe, has that at $75. This would then, by voting for this, this would increase that to $600. Municipal manager.
Me too. Let me listen.
That didn't get voted on.
Sir, I'm sorry. The fire investigator failed, didn't it?
The fire inspector failed. No, the fire investigator failed, but the fire investigator passed.
So at what level?
I'm sorry, so it would have restored?
Restore funding for fire.
It's number 4.
Mr. Klayman, maybe if the clerk could just read in summary what passed.
That's what I was trying to go through.
Madam Chair, if we would limit debate, we could do them one at a time and we won't get lost. I think it's a mistake to try to do them en masse. I think Ms. Gray-Jackson was correct. We're getting lost in the weeds. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just want clarity for everybody, Mr.
Fine.
Klayman, that's all. It gets confusing when it's really big.
All right, that's fine. There isn't a second for the motion. Or no, there is a second.
There was a second. If this motion is defeated, that doesn't preclude us from bringing them separately.
Line number 4, which is the fire inspector, adds $120,000 in direct costs and $80,000 in revenue. That passed. That would be part of this motion. The next is number 6, which is library funding at $600,000, which passed. So that would increase on the S1 that figure from $75,000 to $600,000. The next amendment that passed was number 14, public transportation, deleting the fare increase 115, and I understand that is included in the S1 at that level. So that's the three things. The three things we'll be voting on to roll it in would be, or the four things would be numbers 1, number 4, number 6, and but 14 is already in. So it's actually only adding three things. And then we would take up additional amendments. So it adds 1, 4, and 6.
All right. Is everyone clear on the motion?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Technically, just to be clear, if we incorporate these en masse, despite the intention of Mr. Clayman, I think his intention is right. For example, if you say we're going to incorporate the previously approved amendments, that adds $600,000 to the S version, which already has an additional $75,000 for the libraries. That's a total of $675,000. There'd have to be a separate motion at some point to delete down to the required number. I mean, because if you're moving these en masse, you're accepting these numbers on top of these numbers. You're not doing the math in between or the subtraction in between. There's no motion to do that subtraction.
No, I think that was Ms. Gray Jackson's point,
Yeah.
too, Mr. Mayor, but this is the motion on the floor at the time.
Sure.
All right. Is there anything else, Mr. Clayman, on this particular motion before I just open it up for general discussion?
I think you can open up for general discussion, but I actually think in speaking to the motion, I disagree with the mayor's view. I viewed this as amending them in specific amounts that I identified as I went through. So I don't think this is adding for example, with libraries, I don't think it's adding 600. I think it's adding 525 to a total of 600.
But again, Madam Chair, if you're moving en masse the previously approved amendments, that's what you are doing.
I understand.
That's why it's best to do them separate.
Just a moment, please, both of you. I'm going to ask the clerk how she would interpret that.
What's the question for the clerk? I'm sorry.
The question is, for instance, with libraries, if we move the motion for 600, would she interpret that as a 600 additive or as what we have put 75 in the S1 or a 525 additive?
I think Mr. Clayman was clear that he was interested in a net effect, so I think that we would do the 525.
Okay.
The motion should be for 525.
The chair is going to urge, since we don't have the additive specific figure that, well, I can't advocate.
I gave you the additive specific figure.
All right. At this
very
point,
specific.
Thank you, Mr. Clayman. Mr. Coffey, did you want to speak to this? Yes, ma'am. Please do.
In response to Mr. Clayman, fortunately before we have voted, I told him that I would support this en masse because I thought it would expedite matters. I don't think it does. I think it confuses matters. And so I wanted to make it clear before we vote that I will not support something as confusing as this. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no one else in queue, I'm going to put this on the board. If you support Mr. Clayman's addition of these three motions.
Just a point of clarification.
State your point.
I just want to confirm the amounts. It's plus
right.
520?
No. At this point, I'm going to follow the clerk's interpretation, which is it's the net impact. So even though, for instance, on FCC Amendment 1, it reads 98, it would be an additional $3,000.
So an additional 3,000?
Yes.
And an additional 120,000?
And then for library, well, for fire, it would be the full amount. It's brand new, so.
How much?
Net of 40,000, Mr. Birch. It's a base 120,000 cost and 80,000 revenue for a net 40,000 increase.
And then for libraries, it would be a net of 525,000.
Thank you.
That's not what we're doing.
Thank you. I thought, all right. Is there any further clarification needed on the motion?
Yes, ma'am. Point of order.
Dr. Selkirk.
Well, it may be the same question.
Point of order supersedes. Dr. Selkirk, I'm sorry. Mr. Coffey stated a point of order, which supersedes your motion.
We're going to discuss the same thing. Is the clerk's ruling that incorporating a $600,000 amendment into a provision that already includes $75,000 to the libraries is a net of 525?
That is the clerk's interpretation, and the chair's going to rely on the clerk at this point.
I disagree.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Selkirk.
Well, I'm confused because we're forwarding approved amendments, and the amendment we approved wasn't for it was for $600,000. So I don't know how seems to me it would have been easier. It would be easier to do these one by one correctly. That's what I think.
All right, thank you. Seeing no one else, please vote. Oh, wait, what's the matter here?
Can't vote.
The screen is... Just a minute.
I'm just going to vote against it unless it's too much.
All right, please vote.
No, yeah, that's what I said. I'm going to vote against it.
And that fails. All right, we're back to the main motion, the main substituted motion. Mr. Coffey.
I have nothing to add.
Mr. Klayman.
Don't want to do it that, we'll do it the other way. I'll move to amend the S1 by adding to the FCC line $3,000.
Second.
That item is before us. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll put that up if I can.
This is not a good way to do it.
Please vote. And that fails by 4-7. Mr. Klayman, you want to do another one?
It's the fire inspector line at $120,124 in direct costs, $80,000 in revenues for net of $40,124.
All right. And that's on the second. Is there discussion on that one? Please vote. And that motion fails.
Last one.
Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
Would be the library amendment to the library funding add on the S1 version, $525,000 to raise that amount from $75,000 to $600,000 total.
I need. Please vote. And that amendment fails. 4-7. All right. Back to, anything else, Mr. Klayman?
Not as to those amendments that had been incorporated in the prior bill.
Okay. Do you have any other amendments, sir?
I may, but I'll let others go. I've been there for a while.
All right.
What?
At this time, I have no one in queue. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, wait.
Dr. Selkirk.
Oh, I can't find the first one.
No,
Yeah, I'd like to move some amendments that are before us right now relating to transit. Okay.
Do we have those in printed form, Dr. Selkirk? All right, thank you. Dr. Selkirk, you want to go ahead and describe this while he's passing them out?
This is what I'd like to begin with the services on holidays, and what we have here is there's 2 holidays between now and first quarter budget revision. So what this will do is it'll keep those buses moving on those 2 days, and they in many cases are work days for the people who use them.
Okay.
I urge a yes vote. I think it's the right thing to
Could
do.
you state the dollar amount in the motion?
I'm sorry, it's 700, it's a total of, got to add it up. Oh, should I do these one at a time, day by day? Okay. So we'll begin with Martin Luther King Day, and that's $37,700.
Second.
Could, Dr. Selkirk, would you mind including the revenue line in the budget?
The revenue line is $8,500.
And then the property tax under the charter limit is?
$29,200.
Thank you. Is that acceptable with a second? Yes, yes, there was. You didn't. Now there is. Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. All right. Is there further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, please vote.
I'm doing my best.
And that amendment passes 10-1. Dr. Selcraig, you want to do the next one?
Yes, there's a second one, the number 2, it's for President's Day. The revenues are the same, $37,500 is the cost, and
Ma'am, 37,700 you meant?
37,500? I'm 3,700, I'm sorry. And the revenues are 8,500, and the property tax impact is 29,200.
Thank you.
Second, if there's no between.
The machine is, did you push it on the screen, Dr. Selcraig?
Hit your motion button, please. There you go. Thank you.
There we go. All right, that is before us. Is there discussion? Why don't I do it this way? I better put it on the floor. Never mind. Please vote. And that one passes 10-1. All right? Do we have any others? Dr. Selcraig, do you have anything else?
I do. I've got, let's see. Actually, I'll pass, and I would like to, I think there are other. Yeah, I've got, and under, it was handed out this evening, it's a separate sheet, and it's under Health and Human Services, and it's to restore the funding for the Safety Link program. And actually, the administration has, I think, worked hard to save money in this program, and they've got a strategy for their one position that can be, I think, addressed by Health and Human Services. But it doesn't seem that there's a clear strategy for this position. And in fact, the more I look into this position and this program, Safety Link program, the more aware I am of how critical it may be right at these times.
Dr. Selcraig, would you mind just reading the dollar
Yes.
amount, and then I'll let you speak to it?
It is the Violence Prevention Administrator, and it's $109,504. $41, thank you. And it's and I'd like to have it come out of the IT budget.
All right. Would you push motion, please?
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
every step of the way.
Second.
All right. Now, Dr. Selcraig, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, this program got over 15,000 calls for direct assistance annually. I mean, and it's a program that's really designed to scoop under people when they are in critical need. It's interesting. Safety Link is listed on delinquent notices for utilities. They address domestic violence. It really provides services that are probably more critical right now when people are out of work and in a bind than ever before. And it seems to me that in terms of where we are right now in the economy, this particular program is particularly important, and we should fund it. It's just, what we know is that if people become homeless, it's a lot more expensive and a lot more difficult to stabilize them than preventing them from being homeless, and that's a real part of this work. The other thing is that we also know that when people are out of work, there's a higher incidence of domestic violence, and this is a first-line opportunity to help people who are in those situations and settle things down before things become a crisis. They coordinate with a lot of other agencies. They play an important link between individuals in crisis and services, and they leverage their money and their resources to other programs. It's a valuable thing right now, and I think it's really worth funding.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, with the administration, first of all, it was my understanding that the Safety Link program was still in effect. And could the administration please address this other position and what this would mean to the Safety Link program, and also what effect it might have on the IT budget? Thank you.
Through the chair, Ms. Johnston, I will talk to you about the Safety Links program, and somebody else wants to talk to you about IT. But I think there's not one straightforward answer here. So what I would say is the Safety Links program is a multifaceted program that works with domestic violence and also homeless prevention and rapid rehousing. So there's two positions, and I believe the one that you just had an amendment for was the one that works for interpersonal violence. The major focus of that position has been to develop materials, coordinate with agencies, do things like the little blue booklet that police officers hand out. And we do have a strategy, which I know we have shared with the Assembly, at least with some members, about how those functions would be met. There is also true that we get a lot of phone calls every year, and we work with them. When we looked at having to make hard decisions about the department as a whole, I, like any other director, would tell you, of course, that everything we're doing is important to be doing, and I don't discount the need for domestic violence efforts right now either. But I do believe that we have community partners with this. We have a legislative priority that helps to continue funding in this area. And so I do believe that the community as a whole is still well served by this, even though we are taking a cut. And frankly, I would just say there are no good cuts, but the mayor asked me to make the best decisions and recommendations for how we provide public health services in Anchorage within the whole context of that budget. And I did that with talking with my leadership team and community partners, and I really think the budget as it stands does that most effectively for the city.
Could I do a follow-up question?
Just a minute. You wanted somebody from IT or not?
Well, I just needed a follow-up.
Oh, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, I might be wrong on this, but wasn't some funding through stimulus that we approved last spring?
Right. I didn't mention that because the position we were talking about was the interpersonal violence position, I believe. But yes, through the chair, Ms. Johnston, we did get $750,000 in stimulus funds, and what the community as a whole, my department, United Way, Salvation Army, Catholic Social Services, has come together to revamp how people access funds and utility assistance, and that process is ongoing. And yes, it's true, we'll be down the one position that we cut in the department, but overall, our capacity has grown quite a bit by 4 additional community positions as a result of this funding. And I think the goal will be to see how things go. There's a lot of demand right now, but see if we really can shift the system to be more effective, and then have the community partners, us, United Way, really look at how we do things in the future and what's the best way to fund it.
Thank you.
You want IT or not?
Yes, if there's anybody that would address what this cut would do to IT, it would be helpful.
Well, through the chair, Ms. Johnston, the issue really, IT is funded through the IGC methodology, so it's not like their entire budget is the cash from IT's budget could be moved over to Health and Human Services budget, because they're doing different things. They can't charge out for their services, Health and Human Services, the way IT does. So it's not a real fund source in that regard to pay for a Health and Human Services position.
Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk.
I've asked for a job description for this position, and I've had conversations with people who have interfaced with this violence protection administrative officer. And it is my understanding that it's a more significant job than making pamphlets, that it coordinates services and is engaged in really working on the issue of domestic violence in the community. But it's been hard for me. It's also, I've asked for the actual programs that Safety Link provides, and I just was hoping to get that before this meeting. I don't think I got it. Did I get it this afternoon? Okay, I didn't see it. Thank you. I was working. We've got an effort at the state level to address the problem of domestic violence. Alaska has some of the highest numbers of domestic violence events in the country. I recognize we want to save money, but this is not the right place to do it. I am concerned about some of the cuts in the budget are on the backs of our most vulnerable people and for people who are least likely to come here and testify, and that would be victims of domestic violence. I think that this is important. If it can't be taken from IT, I think it should come. It should come from. It should just be part of the increase in the taxes associated with the property taxes. It doesn't make sense for us to reduce property taxes at the cost of not addressing interpersonal violence in this community, because it's a serious, serious problem. So I urge a yes vote on this. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Starr?
Yeah, I'm not going to be supporting the philosophy of just kind of putting money at it. I looked at this topic pretty clearly, and I see several things that we're doing in our grant reallocations that works, and I think the department head spoke to those allocations appropriately. So my no vote speaks to the allocation of the dollars. There's a grant in particular of looks like $715,000 that brings into this arena for Anchorage domestic violence prevention. It's a 2-year condensed grant. We used to get $750,000 spread over 3 years. So I think what the community is going to see is an intensive focus on the problem through a $1,715,000 grant. I don't think the program's short. Even without this position, I think you're going to see an increased funding level over 2 years, which to me is appropriate. Taxing an IT budget that's already been reduced and or going towards property taxes is not the answer. So I wanted to put my no vote on the record with those qualifiers. Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk again?
I think it's worth noting that the stimulus money was designed to support local governments so that we would not have to lay off people. That was the intent. The idea was not to lay off people, to make sure that local governments continued to function in a healthy and good way in terms of serving the community. And in a sense, what we have done is we've taken the stimulus dollars and we've positioned ourselves to not tax to the cap, which basically reduces our tax obligations. And at some level, I'm okay with that, but I don't think it makes sense to use those monies and at the same time cut programs we're targeting. And it's worth noting that there were 3 positions in Safety Link. One of them is a support position that's going to be absorbed by Health and Human Services. One of them deals with homelessness, and one of them deals with domestic violence. I was told that the administration was going to try, and I assume they're going to fully fund the one that deals with homelessness. But this position deals with domestic violence, and it's a problem for us. And so it doesn't make sense for us to be reducing essential services to our community because we don't want to tax to the cap. So thanks. Or a yes vote.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A quick question. Mr. Starr said something that provoked a question to the administration. Would you concur with his statement that, and forgive me, Mr. Starr, correct me if I get it wrong, but basically we have federal stimulus money coming that's going to do some of the things that this program was doing, therefore this cut is not impactful. Would the administration concur with that?
Well, correct. It isn't. This grant doesn't appear to be stimulus money funded. It's federal grant
money.
It's not part of the stimulus program. It's a continuing program to support that. Previously, the grant was $750,000 spread over 3 years. That grant's expired. Now replaced with a $715 over a 2-year grant.
But it is federal money.
Correct.
So, Ms. Engel.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Gutierrez. We have received federal money for a project called Anchorage Domestic Violence Prevention Project. And it is a partnership of APD, the city's law offices, and our department, as well as AWAKE, that assist people with financial assistance, but also making sure that if they have domestic violence or restraining orders, that people are following the conditions of the order. That funding is scheduled to run out in August of 2010. But it's been an extremely successful results demonstrated program, and it is included in the legislative package, and the governor has recently announced his support for domestic violence, and we're very hopeful that this program that's been so successful that it is being replicated on a statewide basis, the ability to, when you pick somebody up for an arrest, to look and see if they have any conditions, that it will get funded as well in the next legislative cycle. So that's the answer to that. The stimulus money really has to do with housing prevention, and I apologize for such long-winded answers, but unfortunately these are kind of complicated funding streams that we have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't hear an answer to my question, which was,
Sorry.
Is it your opinion, do you concur that this money that we're talking about, this federal money, makes this particular cut to the Safety Link program that Dr. Selkirk's proposing to put back, that makes it not impactful?
Through the chair, Mr. Gutierrez, I would say that every cut has impacts, but we have looked at the essential pieces of the job and tried to make sure that we had a plan and a strategy for covering them in the 2010, in the ongoing years. So like everybody, we have to make priorities. But I can't say there's absolutely no impact.
Okay. The reason I ask is because one of Mr. Starr's statements really set off some alarm bells in my head. In my day job, Madam Chair, I coordinate a federal grant, and the feds are very, very, very clear that federal funding cannot be used to supplant local funding. And I think we have to be very careful with saying, well, we don't need this Safety Link program because we've got this federal funding coming, and this will do the job that the Safety Link program was going to do, because the feds aren't going to like that at all. That's one of the things that we have to be, with the Weed and Seed program, we have to be very careful that it's very clear the money we provide to the Anchorage Police Department and the money that we provided to Health and Human Services in the past is not supplanting, is not in place of any local funding. So we can't cut funding and replace it with federal funding, because that would violate that rule and would not only put the funding in jeopardy, but get us in some hot water with the feds as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Dr. Selkirk?
Well, that raises,
time?
yeah, it is the last time. It raises two questions. One is in fact, it appears that we are cutting the funding for the Safety Link program for their counselor, and with the intention of using stimulus money as a replacement source of funding. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Dr. Selkirk, no. We are cutting a position of a person who's a homeless prevention specialist. We have created a new position that has some case management function, but also has an overall function of program coordination and some other duties. And during the layoff process, the person who's losing their job from homeless prevention will move into the other job. It has some components that still are case management, but it is not taking the funding and just supplanting.
So, and that's the counselor?
That's the person, yes, I don't characterize it.
So you're actually creating a different job that's very similar and using the federal funds there?
Through the chair, Dr. Selkirk, we have a similar position, but what was created before we made the budget was the intent was established in the grant before our budget decisions of what to eliminate.
And then when you spoke about the very successful program that had to do with addressing domestic violence, or is that Safety Link? And are you saying that there's funding for it up to the middle of this summer?
Through the chair, Dr. Selkirk, what we consider Safety Links is a conglomeration of programs looked at dealing with emergency alcohol issues, looked at dealing with domestic violence and abuse, and looking at dealing with homelessness. And we still have the funding. We will still have 2 operating funded positions and 2 grant funded positions on the domestic violence side, and then we will have a number of positions in the homeless side. 1, 2, 3 grant-funded positions for homelessness, this new position we've been speaking about also for homelessness, and then we will still continue some work through the spring with Anchorage Community Mental Health Services on a Pathways to Sobriety project.
Thanks very much.
Right. Seeing no one else in queue, I'll put this on the board. Please vote. And that fails, 5-6. Anyone else?
Madam Chair,
Oh,
I'm sorry, I can't get past my screen, so there we go. It's
go ahead, Mr. Crawford.
Thank you. I'm just, here we go. This is an amendment from the administration they asked me to do. It's the one that says amend to S1 AO 2009-116. It's an IGC basis erroneously included in trust management fees and retirement benefits. It's in the amount of, I think it's in the amount of 263,802, although there's a notation at the line, page 4, section 6, line 25, which reflect a new function cost of $1,021,294. I move to amend the S1 version. And I'd like the administration to speak to it so they can describe what it is.
Ms. Fresca?
Madam Chair, this is an amendment to the police and fire retirement system appropriation, and it deals with correcting an IGC methodology error, and it reduces the IGCs to make them more in line to what they've been in the past, and brings them in line with what has been in the past.
Is there any further discussion on this amendment? Is there any opposition to this amendment? You want to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, not to the amendment. I just wanted to be next in line to propose my amendment. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, then, I'm seeing, Mr. Clement, are you objecting to the amendment, or do you want to speak to the amendment?
I have a question before I suspect I'm not, but I just had a question to make sure I understand.
Okay.
This is actually reducing the direct cost to $263,000. Does that mean there's now, I see Ms. Fresca shaking her head.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Clayman, it does not reduce their direct costs, it reduces their IGCs, which, if you remember in the budget book, we've got the direct costs up above on a page, then we've got the revenues, and then we've got the IGCs.
So the bottom line is this has no net impact on the overall budget.
That's on the direct cost budget, correct. But it corrects the IGCs, which are the fund-to-fund charges.
All right. Thank you. Then
All right. Is there anyone who has any objection to this amendment? Hearing seeing none, this amendment is approved unanimously. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move to provide, in the Health and Human Services Department, to provide an increase of $100,000 to the grant. It's a contract with Anchorage, and it's to operate and maintain the Anchorage Senior Center. And one of the issues is that the center has been in very, very serious financial trouble since 2008.
Ms. Gray-Jackson, I hate to interrupt. I just need a second.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And you did say the dollar amount, didn't you?
Yes, I believe I did.
Thank you.
But I'll say it again, $100,000.
Thank you.
And let me back up a minute. Mr. Flynn and I attended the annual breakfast that the center sponsors for the mayor and the assembly members, and it was a wonderful breakfast once again. But at that breakfast, we were made aware of the center's issue and the situation there, and it's really, really bad. And I think that it is really important for us to, in the midst of a budget deficit and being fiscally responsible, I just think it's important to provide funding to help our seniors survive and continue to do what they do for the rest of the life that they have in this community. And with that said, I see some seniors in the audience, and I'd like for the folks in the audience who are here to ask for the Assembly support to just stand up if you don't mind. I want to thank you for coming out. Thank you. Madam Chair, I don't have anything else to say, just that I really would like to see my colleagues support this increase to help our seniors. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Tell a story here, if you don't mind, with a little bit of leave. When I was a college student, I was home for the summer, and as you probably know, my mother was prone to throw pretty large birthdays in August. And one August 3rd, a woman came to the door and rang the doorbell, and I answered, and she was my high school security guard. And she asked me what the heck I was doing in the house, and I said, well, I live here. What are you doing here? She said, oh, well, I'm a friend of your mom's. I'm here to help throw the party. And I said, well, that's great. She said, wait a minute. You're her son, right? I said, yeah. So how come I never knew that? I said, well, when I was in high school, I knew that if I got in trouble in high school, it was better to keep it there and not bring it home. So I didn't pull rank like some other kids. I expect the same courtesy of me, and unfortunately on this amendment, which I tend to be supportive of, members who are supportive of the senior center took it upon themselves to contact my mother and ask her to lobby me on this issue. That's not acceptable. Not ever, not on any subject. And so I'm voting no. Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk?
I would normally support this, but in light of the fact that almost every program that has come before us this year, Project Access, which provides money, support to people who can't afford health care, children's programs, just across the board, everybody has in some way been taking cuts. And the senior citizens budget hasn't been cut this year. It's fully funded. It's one of the few public community service grants that we have that's fully funded. If you had been in the pot this year, I can tell you, you wouldn't be getting $100,000, you'd be getting $80,000. But because you negotiated a 2-year contract, your funding is whole. What I would say is that this should be brought back at first quarter budget revision to see where the city is and what can be restored. And there's a list of things on the table right now that I think are really important things. That, for example, we just funded those holidays for up until first quarter budget. We don't know what's available after first quarter budget that we just approved on the buses. So I want to express my desire to support this, but with the enormous needs in areas that are just core services like the one we just looked at in terms of domestic violence, I won't be supporting it, and I will hope that it does get fully funded in the first quarter budget revision.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. And that fails 3-9.
Who'd we add? 3-8.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Thank you for the correction. I apologize.
Yeah. I would have voted twice if I could. Once on both sides.
The chair is human. Ms. Gray-Jackson, do you want to do another?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have about 14 more amendments. Just kidding. I have one more amendment that I'd like to bring forward, and that's I moved to amend the budget and the Project Management and Engineering Department to reinstate funding for a senior accountant 2 and accounting clerk 3. And my reasoning for this, besides the fact that I believe these positions are needed positions, these positions are also funded through bonds and or grants, so it's not any tax dollars.
I'm sorry, I need a second, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the amount is $185,201. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Ms. Johnson, you want to speak to it?
Yes, I'd like to ask the administration as far as the funding for this position.
Madam Chair, through the Chair, Greg Jones. These positions are, in fact, bond and grant funded. They were offered as cuts in the process of trying to make our departments more efficient. We had grown the department substantially over the last few years, and the level of project activity has started to decline, and that we felt it was appropriate to cut these just to recognize that reduction in the amount of work that we're doing.
Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you. To the administration, if these positions are at least partially funded from voter-approved bonds, what's the money going to be spent on instead?
To the Chair, Mr. Gutierrez, the money will still go to the improvements associated with the bonds. We believe less overhead associated with those bond funds puts more money into the actual improvements that were approved by the voters.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Seeing no one else in queue, I'll put that on the board. Please vote. And that one fails 5-6. All right. Mr. Klayman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe I have 3 amendments. I'll start on looking at the back page of the S1 version. For the arts and cultural grants, I would move to amend that amount by adding $124,330 to bring it to the level of $274,330. That would bring it back to the 2009 level. Second.
That motion is before us. And just say the amount one more time. I didn't write it quick enough.
The amendment would add $124,330. It would make it the total amount would be $274,330.
All right, but basically it's adding $124,330.
Right, brings it back to the 2009 level.
All right, Mr. Quinn.
And I'll speak.
I'm sorry, Mr. Klayman. You have the floor. I shouldn't have gone. Go ahead.
I will speak very briefly to this. I think that the arts and cultural grants are actually one of the things that the city, in working in partnership with private industry and nonprofit groups, has really done great things for the city in terms of opportunities for the public to come together. And because this funding has actually stayed level for the last 2 years, by keeping it at that level, they're actually, compared to inflation, they're taking a cut, and this brings so much to the community that I think we need to maintain existing levels. I think there's a lot of groups that it's a small amount that they get, but it makes a big difference in terms of bringing people together and giving a lot of opportunities for people in what are sometimes financially challenging times. And so I would encourage returning this to the 2009 level. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank Mr. Klayman for bringing this amendment. I'm going to vote for it just because these grants are very small. They tend to be maybe $5,000 a piece. And I harbor no illusions as to the ultimate fate of this amendment. It's going to be vetoed, and I understand why. But this is I just want people to understand this is a real economic driver for our community. We give very small amounts of money to nonprofits which are able to take those dollars and leverage them and bring terrific performances both from afar and local artists and get kids involved and bring business to downtown restaurants and keep the pack filled. There's nothing better than going downtown on a Saturday night and not being able to find a parking space because all 3 theaters are filled and people are out and involved and they're active in their community. And I would love to have been able to fully fund the arts grants at last year's levels. And so I'll vote for the amendment knowing it's going to not be ultimately successful. But because it's just something I think is so good for us culturally, so good for us economically, and so good for us as a community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Coffey?
I want to make sure Mr. Klayman referenced this back page where his number 8 is found. I'm assuming you're talking about the amendment number 7 on the combined assembly members at the bottom of the front page because of the amount. Is that right?
Hold on, Mr. Coffey, you'll need to, I looked at the back page, which is page 1 of 1, line 110, municipal manager, arts and cultural grants, 150, and I added 124,330. That is there another page?
No, it's coming off of the other amendment. When you first said it, I thought you were talking about something else. Now I'm clear.
Okay.
It takes it back. Here's my comment, and I echo what others have said. We're going to fund the arts at 100% of last year, and we're going to cut everything else. Not me. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. And that one passes 6-5.
Thank you. Madam Chair, my next amendment would be to the fire budget. I would move to add funding for a fire academy of 32 recruits to begin sometime in 2010 and begin the recruiting process. It would add $672,000 to the fire budget, and this shows up on the proposed amendments that was passed on earlier.
Point of order, Madam Chair, if I might.
Just a minute. Okay, there's been no second, but you
Oh,
want to
well,
say
I'll
your
wait for the
point?
second.
No, you,
Okay.
point of
My
order?
point of order is this. This amendment has been proposed and failed previously. Are we going to be taking up matters that we have proposed and failed?
Mr. Coffey, this
Yes,
was never
sir.
voted on.
Excuse me, Mr. Clayman.
Is it?
I've
If
got a
it
rule
hasn't,
on
then
the point.
my point of order is wrong.
I believe that it's an appropriate motion because it did not come forward specifically the way it's being stated now. And it's a different dollar amount.
Your ruling, Madam Chair. I'm fine.
All right, thank you. Well, no, wait a minute. The clerk is showing me. It was number 2 on the combined, so it was 672. And
I do not believe it was offered, Madam Chair.
yeah, it was not offered. Thank you. I just wanted to be sure I was correct. It has not been offered before. The dollar amount was $672,000. All right.
If the question as to whether it's correct, I'll defer to Ms. Frasca because I had inquired with her and I don't recall what she responded. Did we, Ms. Frasca?
Would you slow down a minute? Okay, I'm sorry. We do have a second now because that happened in the middle there. I want to make sure. All right. Mr. Coffey, that was just a point of order, not in queue. All right. Hold on, then. Go ahead, Mr. Flynn.
Just to confirm, I believe when I inquired with OMB as to what the appropriate funding level, if we were to do this, would be that 672 was a response. Is that correct, Ms. Frasca? Do I have my memory correct?
Mr. Flynn, since then, I've had some more communications with the fire department, and I don't know exactly what the number would be. Is the 672 that Mr. Clayman is proposing, was that starting in, what month was that?
July 22.
Okay. And the department indicated that that they would expect to hire recruits starting in September. And so I don't know how that translates into what the cost would be for half of a year.
Maybe we get the chief up here. Can he help with that, perhaps? Just to make sure we got the right number before we start arguing.
And while he's coming, can I ask a question? It says on the sheet, January. You're making the motion in July. Is that correct?
I believe the amendment number 2 reads, Mr. Coffey, the Academy will commence in July of 2010.
The one I have said January. That's why I asked the question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Chief.
Yes, ma'am. From what I understand from talking to, Mr. Clayman, through the chair, from talking to the folks that we have, that 672 would only be the cost of the academy for equipment and putting it on with the overtime that it would take. And then also it would, that does not include the salaries. And having an academy, as we all know what's going to be happening in the future, it's going to be difficult if we cut $20 million this year out of the 2010 budget and we're going to cut $25 million next year out of the 2011 budget. An academy is not the proper thing to do at this time. It is something that we have to address, but at this time I think it would be difficult to follow through.
Actually, Mr. Hall, that isn't responsive at all to the question. The only question we had was what is the cost? What is the accurate cost if it was added? Not whether I understand that you, on behalf of the administration, don't support the amendment, but we're trying to get the accurate cost.
I'm sorry about that. I misunderstood. It was. I'm not sure what the salaries would include. I know that the 672 was for the academy only, for putting it on for equipment and overtime to put it on. That it does not include the salaries.
Well, like Mr. Flynn, I note even if this passes, I have a pretty good understanding of what the mayor will do with it with his line item veto power. So 672, I think we can leave as the figure.
Mr. Clement, do you want to estimate the number of people who would come out of it? And so he could estimate the salaries if you wanted.
We had proposed, the proposal includes 32 recruits. How many would you anticipate coming out of that?
You probably lose about, out of 33, in reality, probably lose 8 of those. So down to 25, 33, 20, down to 25 and about 60,000 on the first year salary. So 60 times 25.
But that salary wouldn't be for a whole year for purposes of this budget.
They come in as probationary firefighters, and I believe that's a round figure, maybe closer to 58.
No, his point was it wouldn't be a full year salary.
Correct. Oh, I'm sorry, half, whatever, when they got hired.
My mind isn't where, hold on.
You want to start?
So,
Do you want a little time, Mr. Clement, on that? What do you want to do? Your
I'm
call.
just doing it fast. The rough number I'm getting, if it's for 3 months, I'm adding roughly $360,000 for the salaries.
Next elements.
So round numbers, I moved to amend it to add $1 million.
Okay.
Be an amendment to the motion so that the figure would be $1 million and not 680 or 672.
Is that acceptable to the second? All right. The amendment is to add $1 million to the fire budget for the purposes of Academy.
And I have a couple of comments, but I also have a question for the administration, which I'm not sure whether it's better for the administration. Well, the first question is, I understand there's a stimulus grant called a SAFER grant that would provide up to 12 positions that with stimulus funds it would pay the salaries and the training for the 12 additional positions for 2 years, and the only commitment the fire department and the city would have to make would be to have no layoffs during that 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, there's no promise that they would continue to keep those positions. It's just it basically funds the position for 2 years and gets a guarantee of no layoffs. I'm wondering whether that's something that the fire department is planning to apply for, and if not, why not?
I'll answer that on behalf of the fire chief. I've looked at that grant extensively, and the problem is it ties your hands. There is no way you can lay off any firefighter once you accept that grant for a 2-year period of time. And that would put us in a position that if we had to cut the budget substantially next year, then we could not touch the firefighter. It also says in there that we cannot supplant current operations. So it's very, very specific about your manning and the start date of what that manning is that they count. It's very specific about the firefighters that you hire for the grant, and it's very specific in that it says there'll be no supplanting of funds or activities. So we are not planning on going forward with that grant.
That answers the question. I will then speak both briefly to the amendment and to the grant. I don't have any other questions for the fire chief. Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. First, with regard to the stimulus grant, it seems to me a really wise thing for the city to apply for the grant for 2 reasons. One is that one of the biggest challenges we will face in the years ahead if we don't have a training academy is that as firefighters retire, we'll have a gradual loss in the number of people in the department, and it will create an enormous pressure to maintain existing services. The only way to do it will be primarily through overtime, and so getting a fire academy funded and getting those recruits in the training so that they can go to work for this community, we'll need to plan ahead, or else we're going to have huge overtime budget problems in the years ahead. The SAFER grant actually gives security of funding to provide for 12 positions, which, unless there's plans to lay off firefighters, if we're trying to maintain existing level of services, which I certainly understand from comments the mayor has made about no further rolling closures, as well as his editorial in the paper this morning, that having that assistance will allow us to actually maintain existing levels, keep overtime expenses down, and provide the fire protection that I think the community desires. So since the administration is not willing to go forward with the SAFER grant, I would encourage a yes vote on this funding so that we can start the process of getting a fire academy in place and keep our overtime budget down in the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Mr. Coffey.
Thank you. I've had some discussions with Mr. Clayman and with the chief and with the head of the union, on this issue. And this applies to the fire department only, not to police. I don't know about that if we're coming up academy on the police. But we didn't used to have to run 30 and 40 people academies. In fact, the chief told me he went and got himself trained as a firefighter one himself and came into the department in that manner. My view here is what we will find is over time, a rate of attrition in the fire department, which I've been told by the chief and others, runs about 13 in a year. So basically one firefighter a month retires, quits, whatever. You don't have to run a 32-man academy or a 40-person academy in order to replace those people that are who are attritioned out, if you would, through their own choices. You can hire qualified firefighter 1s, EMT 1s, EMT 2s. You can put them through an abbreviated course of 3 weeks is what they do or have done in the past. And as a result of that, you can replace 3, 5, 7, a small number of firefighters as you need to do it to prevent a decline in overall service. Nothing prevents us from doing that, and nothing compels us to add an additional $1 million to the budget tonight in order to plan for an academy, which the administration and the chief do not favor at this time. So I am a no vote on this. Thank you.
Mr. Starr?
I'm going to be a no vote as well, and it's easy to infer that you're a no vote and you don't support public safety or the mission statements of the police and fire, and it's not that at all. I think you look at the budget numbers and you see a solid commitment to the core services of this, and I see a number where we have increased the fire budget and the police budget. Fire budget's going to go up 10.5 or 10.1% from last year to this coming year. We're increasing their budget about $7.5 million. There's no reductions in our commitment to fire protection and fire service. I think Mr. Coffey's points are well made on a perhaps a different way to keep your staffing numbers up. There's also areas that we could revisit with the union's minimum staffing levels on equipment, which had taken recently with the contract approvals from a 3-man truck, 3 men on a truck to 4 in some cases. There's other ways to do it. And I think our solid commitment to public safety is represented here in the 10.1% increase in fire, and the police budget, I won't speak to that one if that amendment comes forward, is we're committing 7% additional funds, taxpayer money, to the police department. Neither are reduced. They're significantly increased, and I appreciate the mayor's commitment to that, and I'll support it. I think there's other ways to do academies and staff, so thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief, come on back up, would you please? While you're in transition, Mr. Coffey's point was well made, but the question I have to you, and while Mr. Coffey several times used the phrase, we can do these things, nothing prohibits us from doing these things, my question to you is that how you're going to do these things? Is this how you're going to fight attrition and replace firefighters as they retire or leave?
Through the chair, Mr. Gutierrez, that's actually exactly what my administration has been discussing and how we can go about doing that. How can we hire and do it in a more economical manner, and who can we talk? We talked about hiring IAFF, people that are already qualified, people that have a State of Alaska Firefighter 1, EMTs. It's in discussion, and we are going to have to adapt and overcome. So yes, sir, I believe that's where we're headed.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Klayman.
I'll just note very briefly in response to Mr. Coffey's comments, and I've had very engaging discussions with Mr. Coffey on this topic, and my concern is if I really saw a concrete plan from the administration, they've been in office almost 6 months, if they really had that plan to deal with the attrition issue and that plan had been moving forward, I might not come forward to this amendment, but because there isn't a plan in place, that's why I think we need to make this amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Birch.
The last time we checked, we had there were essentially hundreds of respondents to open municipal positions in the fire department. So I mean, I think there's There are a number of capable and qualified and interested parties that, for open positions. And I'd also note that we're currently entangled in a number of labor agreements that have some very onerous and very cumbersome provisions, and I appreciate the additional insight on the strings attached and the conditions associated with the proposed grant funding for this academy. So I will be a no vote as well. I think we do not need the entanglements brought by that grant, and I think we have means available to us to provide the staffing necessary to do this work. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is an amendment which would be better served under discussion at first quarter budget amendments, simply because we want to get a better picture of where our revenues are going to be for the next coming year, and allow the chief a little more time to develop his staffing plan. So perhaps it will be appropriate to approve this in March or April, but for now, I'm going to defer. Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk?
I also think that this is an appropriate idea to bring forward first quarter budget revision. But I also want to comment that I would think that if we were even considering increasing the budget this much, we would want to begin by reinstating the fire inspector and the fire safety officer, because I think that those are real issues, real problems, and that we're going to feel the losses immediately from them. So I'm not supporting this, and I hope it's reconsidered and looked at first quarter budget. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. In response to Mr. Klayman and to echo what Mr. Flynn and Ms. Selkirk mentioned, we've said, at all of our budget sessions so far that this is something we'd be willing to look at first quarter. We are working on strategies, and by first quarter, if it looks like it is feasible to do some partial academies or look at other hiring methodologies, we'll be prepared at that time to discuss it with the Assembly. We said that from day one, so it's not that we haven't been planning, it's just we recognize the budget realities for this year. And just to remind people again, we've put forth a 2-year plan to get this back to fiscal health. Everything added this year means bigger cuts next year. So, it compounds the problem. But when it comes to fire safety and police safety, that's why we said first quarter we are willing to look at those areas.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also am going to be a no vote on the amendment for some of the reasons already stated. I think it's something more properly taken up at first quarter. I'd like to give the administration a chance to change the way we bring firefighters on to see if we can do it more quickly, more cost effectively, and would also encourage the police department to look at the same. That might help as well. So, thank you.
All right. Seeing no one else in queue, could you please vote?
He's coming.
Yeah. That one fails 2-9. Anyone else?
I have one more.
Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
Turning to the last page of the 2010, I'd moved to add funding for a police academy of 28 recruits to begin recruiting in January of 2010, with the academy to commence in the summer of 2010. Based on the information we received, the added amount would be $1.7 million. Need a second.
That item is before us.
And I'll speak briefly to the amendment. The question about police and fire overtime is a topic upon which, for the same reason I made the fire amendment, if we don't start and get a real plan in place to start bringing on new recruits to both police and fire, and here it's police, we're going to see an overtime budget that gets completely out of control. And it takes 18 months for those individuals to actually get on the force and working at full capacity. And so once you figure in the attrition of one or even, I think with the police, it's more like 1.5 police officers per month, you get this enormous attrition and a pressure on the overtime budget just to maintain the existing level of police service. And so I think we need to start planning for an academy, and I will just make this last comment with regard to sort of let's look at all this at first quarter budget revisions. If I totaled up all the things that we are going to look for at first quarter budget revisions, I think it starts becoming on the order of $3 to $5 million more we're hoping to find in revenue, and it makes me skeptical that the money will be there. And I noted in the mayor's editorial this morning, he noted that his first priority in terms of additional revenues discovered on first quarter budget revisions will be to reduce the tax increase, which suggests that fire and police academies and maintaining our public service function will continue to be at risk at first quarter. So I'm making this motion because I think it can show this Assembly making the needed commitment that we should have for public safety in the community. Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to be supporting this amendment for the reasons that Mr. Klayman stated. It takes a great deal of time and effort for us to bring police officers on, in part because finding qualified applicants is difficult, and in part because our standards are very high, as they should be, for anyone who's going to be allowed to be given authorization to use deadly force in the line of work. The standards should be exceptionally high, and I think they are. And even with that, it's hard to get a full class through. People drop out for one reason or another. It takes a long time for us to get officers in place, and there are an awful lot of officers in the police department who are eligible to retire. Because of that, the trite old saying, you don't wait till you're thirsty to dig a well. I think now is the time to get an academy in place. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves even shorter than we already are. We're going to find the overtime budgets exploded even more than they already are, simply to keep an adequate number of officers on the street on a daily basis. And I think so. I would agree with Mr. Klayman. Now is the time to bring an academy forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I have a number of questions for the administration. First, the number of police we currently have compared to what we had 3 years ago when we had a real overtime problem. Does anybody have those figures?
Through the Chair, Ms. Johnson, right now we have about 385 sworn officers.
And do you remember how much, even like 2 years ago?
Yeah, I know that in the last 5 years we've added about 90 officers. So in the last 2 years, I believe we brought on about 50 or so of those.
And what's our attrition rate this year? Do you have?
It's about one officer a month is a fair estimate over time. The challenge we have is that when officers retire, they're not required to give us a certain amount of heads up in that. So typically, retrospectively, we look at our trends and make our projections. It's about one officer a month.
And have you noticed any difference in attrition this year from last?
No, we have not. It's about the same rate.
So there's not they haven't been slowing up as far as overtime budget. What are you, as far as your actuals to budget at this point?
Right now we're sitting, well, as Mr. Crawford, I believe, mentioned in the last Assembly meeting, we're at roughly 60% of budget. That was the October number. Now that we're into December, our overtime budget is approximately $3.7 million. We have made great strides in keeping to that budget in the last 2 years. Certainly staffing has helped. Also, though, we have created systems to better monitor it and better understand it and control it.
So in October, you were 60%?
Correct.
And that was with 2 more months to go?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Coffey?
Thank you. You'll note in the budget there's $100,000 for a deployment study which may assist in how we use our force. Number one. Chief, I don't have any questions for you. You answered the ones I was going to ask. This is just a statement. When I first came on the Assembly in 2004, we had a fairly lengthy discussion about the addition of officers based on a study that was 2 or 3 years before that. And we embarked on a hiring program that, as the Chief noted, brought us up to about 90 officers. And I'm certainly we're down somewhat by the peak we had. But at that time, of course, no one factored in the contracts that were passed last December, which mean that we're basically spending on average $158,000 for per officer, that's our burden cost. That's an awful lot of money, and it's a substantial increase over previous levels of compensation. So, and that's going to compound itself through the public employees retirement system with the use of the 3-year system and the things that happen along there. So we're right to take a look at both our deployment and our level of requirements of officers to meet the whatever the recommendations come out of the deployment study. The idea of putting another $1.7 million in at this point in time until that information is in front of us doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't disagree that we may need to be replacing officers and that officer replacement for the police may be more difficult than the fire department. However, I note that when we make a big deal out about, I think we said overtime budgets will explode. Well, they exploded last year. If you look at it, they were 143% of, in 2008, 143% of the budget at this time. It's gotten under control since the new administration has come in, and it looks like they're handling it pretty well. So if the overtime budget is 3.7, we're talking about spending half that amount on an academy right now. And they're at 60%, and call it 75% today, and they've probably got another 3 weeks to go. We're not in an emergency situation, folks. Our police force is substantially larger than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And when we get the information from the deployment study and so on and get ourselves a new chief of police, then I'll be happy to consider, as the mayor said, the idea of an academy at first quarter budget. Thank you very much. I'm a no vote.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in queue, please vote.
Oh, wait.
And that one fails 3-8. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A quick question, to Mr. Flynn. On the back page, page 101, of the S1, line number 12, the assembly. I notice you're reducing your office budget by $4,000, taking $320 from each assembly member's meal budget. What I'd like to know is what in total is each assembly member's portion of the meal budget?
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. That's actually written incorrectly. It's supposed to be a reduction of $320 from each assembly member's office budget to pay for meals. So we're getting rid of the assembly's meal budget. I apologize.
So you're zeroing out the assembly's meal budget?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. I was just going to, Madam Chair, amend if that 320 was some portion of the meal budget. I was going to move to amend mine out entirely because I don't eat the meals, but I will support this. It does that. Thank you.
Question, Madam Chair? So that should read office budget rather than meal budget?
That is correct.
And so I would move that we make that corrective amendment.
Madam Chair?
Just a moment here. All right. If you make a motion, I need you to post it in.
I did.
Click on the board. Well, Mr. Coffey, I got you. Thank you, Ms. Johnston. All right. And I'd appreciate if you'd be recognized before you speak. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I understood before I
bad boy
did anything. Thank you.
All right. So is everybody clear what Mr. Coffey's motion was?
No.
All right. I thought not. All right. On what line is this, Mr. Coffey?
12, but there's no line numbers. It's item 12, page 1 of 1, the very last page of the S1
All right. And
version.
so what should it read?
May I help you out here, Mr. Coffey?
Please.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Flynn.
It should read, following the first semicolon, reduce $320 from each assembly member's office budget.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
That's what I said. Thanks for the help.
Thank you very much. All right. And that's been seconded. Is there objection to doing it?
Madam Chair?
All right. I'm sorry. I can't tell from Q.
Okay.
So.
Well,
The motion is to amend page 1 of 1 to, instead of saying meal budget, to say office budget. That's what the amendment was. All right. And I'm going to have to go on hands because there's 5 people in queue. Ms. Gray-Jackson, to that amendment.
thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify what office budget means so that nobody thinks that each of us have an office in City Hall with staff. office budget means we each get $9,000, and most of us use that to hire legislative aid at $750 a month. And I don't know how we would do this on my behalf, because I don't eat the meals. I never have. I don't eat lunchtime meals. I don't eat any meals. So I really would respectfully request that I not have to give up $320 from my office budget that I use and really appreciate, because it helps me do the job for the people in my district and this community, not to have to give up that $320. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, anyone else on this particular?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right, I'm going to just clear the board, and then we'll just take, if you could cue in, if you want to speak about this amendment, then I would appreciate it. So I'm going to just erase everybody here for just a second. Boy, I've got so many names I can't erase them. Okay, it's clear. Mr. Gutierrez, you're first.
Thank you. I'm a little more confused than I was before, and I appreciate it. I think Ms. Gray Jackson shed some light on it. So we're not stopping eating at the taxpayer expense, right? We're just taking so in essence, because I don't eat the meals, you're reducing my office budget so that you can continue to eat at taxpayer expense. Is that what's going on here? Mr. Flynn, you're grinning, I'll let you answer.
You're very kind. What we are doing, what I have proposed here, is to reduce each of our budgets by an amount to cover the expense of our meals, so that the issue of taxpayers paying for our meals is off the table, since we can spend those dollars as a body, as individual members of the Assembly, however we deem appropriate.
And so if I don't eat the meals that are taxpayer funded, no matter where it comes from, I'm still being forced to pay for your meal.
I'm kind of hoping actually you'll sit down with me and have dinner, Mike.
I'd be happy to sit down with you and have dinner. I just am happy to buy my own dinner and not have the taxpayers buy it for me. I actually now have an objection to this, because I don't think that's right. I think if we're going to eliminate the meal budget, let's eliminate the meal budget and not sort of make it look to the public like we're not eating at taxpayer expense. Instead, I'm happy to bring my own sandwich to the meetings, and I'll sit back in the back and enjoy it with you. But I do object now to reducing my office budget to pay for everybody else's dinner.
Dr. Selkirk.
It's my understanding is that we don't have a specific meal budget, that we all pay from our accounts for the meals. Could you explain this, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Grinstein, would you please?
There is a budget for meals. It does not come out of your personal accounts.
Her response was there is a budget line item for meals. It does not come out of office accounts.
Okay, so then I guess there's a little bit of misunderstanding about what we're doing here. If we delete the word meal budget, then what does that mean? It means that it would come out of our independent budgets, and the meal budget would stand like it has always stood?
Mr. Flynn.
The idea is that we would use these dollars coming from our office budgets to support the meal budget, to supplant the meal budget.
Why don't you just delete the meal budget?
That's the net effect.
Pardon?
That is the net effect.
But it's my understanding from the clerk that there is a meal budget. Why? I don't understand what we're doing here. It's not. Could you explain why you would want to reduce our budgets instead of the meal budget when you're seeking to reduce the meal budget?
It perhaps was not presented as cleanly as I would have liked, but the idea is we take dollars that we utilize currently, and we allow those dollars to supplant other dollars we're spending, so that we can reduce the expense to the taxpayer.
I just assume leave it as it is and just reduce the meal budget. Thank you.
Mr. Klayman.
As to the specific amendment proposed by Mr. Coffey, which I actually thank him for because it's a clarification, I support the amendment that makes it clear that it's from the office budget. And in light of this clarification, I will say a couple of things now, and then I'll say more later when I move to amend. I am done with eating meals at taxpayer expense. I am going to move, after this is over, to delete this and just can the meal budget, because we have a strong mayor form of government. We have a strong governor form of government in the state. And what that means by The flip side is that means you have a weak legislature and you have a weak assembly by the design of the charter and the design of our Constitution. If you look at the legislature, they have 2 and 3 staff members that get full salaries with benefits to help their citizen legislators figure out how to do their job. We have the grand total of each of us, $9,000 per person for an assistant. I can tell you I spend it on my assistant as much as possible, and they are incredibly helpful, but they're very part-time and they have other jobs, and it keeps us in the position of a weak assembly. But if we're going to get in the business of cutting even the small amount we get for assistants in this job, the public is not getting well served by this body if we keep cutting that budget. So I'm done with eating meals on the deal. I'm going to move to delete the meal budget, and we can all bring sandwiches, and I'll look forward to sharing them with my colleagues. Thank you.
Okay. At this point, I've been asked to declare a break, so we're going to take about a 20-minute break. And they can call it dinner time. No, just a minute, sir. I'm not calling it dinner break. I'm just calling it break. All right? And at that point, maybe we can clarify what the existing budget lines are during that break.
Can we vote on the pending motion to fix that line before we break?
No, there's lack of clarity a minute. So at this point, we're in recess for about 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Session. And I have a proposal to make on this particular amendment, if I could. I'm going to take the chair's liberty to just try this. Basically, within the clerk's office, we have broad discretionary ability to create line items and move line items around. I'm going to suggest to you the total dollar amount here is only $3,500, that we just take a $3,500 reduction in the clerk's office, and I will work with Barbara to make sure it comes out of food. Is that all right?
Wait, say again?
I'm going to suggest to the maker of this, well, actually, it's the substitution, it's Mr. Coffey's amendment, that instead of doing it this way, instead you just call for a $3,500 reduction to the clerk's office. And then Ms. Grinstein and I will work together to make sure it comes out of the food budget.
You need a second for that motion, Madam Chair?
Well, I think I can. I wonder if that was purposeful, Mr. Coffey.
I think so. I'm glad there's cameras rolling. This is
Actually,
good. We need a moment of levity. In
No, sir, what we need is a substitute motion. Mr. All right. I'm just suggesting that somebody could substitute Mr. Coffey's motion.
Yeah.
And I'm Ms. Johnston. Could you do it?
I would like to substitute Mr. Coffey's motion by having $3,500 taken from the Assembly Clerk's budget.
Second.
All right. Is there discussion on that? Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
Well, looking at this line item in the S1, it's a kind of the discussion page. It says reduce Assemblymember Flynn's office budget by $4,000, reduce $320 from each Assemblymember's office budget, reduce Assembly travel budget by $3,000. So the proposal is to basically take the second sentence or the second phrase and have that read, reduce Assembly budget by $3,500. Or should it really be $3,520?
Okay.
Can we just do the total? Just a moment, please.
Because we're already reducing, you need the money from the $4,000 budget, and you need the $3,000 from the travel budget. Okay. So delete and reduce, give that, and just say delete 35.
The clerk's suggestion is, instead of the central phrase that says reduce $320 from each Assembly member's meal budget total, instead just use the total figure and say reduce $3,520 from the clerk's budget.
Yes.
Yes. Fine.
Is that acceptable?
Mm-hmm. Second concurs.
But it's really the second phrase, because the total cut that's proposed on this is actually $10,520.
You are correct, sir.
So you're changing the language for the middle phrase.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Klayman, anything else? All right, anything else on this substitute budget amendment? Is there objection to it? Seeing none, the middle phrase of that 12 on assembly is amended. All right. Anybody else have any amendments at this time?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you. After that discussion, we really need this item. I move to add funds to restore a budget analyst position to the Assembly office, and I'm passing the paperwork down.
Second.
I'm almost embarrassed to make the motion after that discussion about $3,500, but thank you for the second. Mr. Gutierrez, may I, Madam Chair?
Yeah, I just did the clerk. You get that? You ready? Okay. Could you put in the screen, please? It helps the clerk.
Sorry.
Ms. Gutierrez, thank you, sir. Go ahead, Ms. Drummond. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, the Assembly's so busy cutting off its nose to spite its face that we're going to have trouble getting done what we need to get done in order to serve the public. Mr. Gutierrez recalled that when he was one of the 2 budget analysts that the Assembly Department used to have, his salary was covered by the utilities, by IGCs from the utilities. Hence, the IGCs outside general government in the column on the right side for $60,000 will cover half of this position, and the other half will be from property tax under the charter limit to restore a function that the Assembly really needs help on, as the previous conversation demonstrated. Thank you.
Okay, could I have about a minute recess here? You want to say that in the record, Madam Clerk?
The position was combined as elections/budget, and I believe we're still getting the $60,000 from the utilities because we're doing a combined function.
That's my understanding, too, the last time we went through this budget item. Administration, can you confirm, or do you know? All right. Mr. Coffey? Dr. Socraig? Mr. Starr?
I won't be supporting it. I think if I need highly technical and straightforward support from our CFO, I can get it by asking. I appreciate the ability to have the open doors to those executives that are paid to do these functions. I've had a conversation with the clerk and the chair about the opportunity to utilize and cross-utilize the elections coordinator when it's not heavy elections time, which will work nicely because it's not always heavy budget times. I'm not going to be supporting it. I think there's another way to work it, and I'm not uncomfortable with the link that the Assembly and the information coming out of the administration. You just have to know the right questions to ask, apparently. So I'm not going to be supportive of it. I like the interchange that the checks and balances provided between the legislative and the executive branch as it is. Thank you.
Ms. Johnston?
This is a question to the clerk. Are we currently interviewing for a budget elections position?
We are. We hope to have a decision by this week.
Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is one really big problem with combining the budget and elections position, and that is that in the run-up to the first quarter budget revisions, the elections/budget person is entirely an elections person and is of absolutely no use to us. Tonight we've talked about putting off a lot of decisions, a lot of very important decisions until first quarter budget revisions, and we're not going to have any information of our own, independent Assembly information upon which to base those divisions, because our elections coordinator is going to be doing their elections job. And as the clerk well knows, it's probably too big a job for one person for those few months of the year. So we're not going to get any budget work out of that person during the election cycle. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Mr. Birch?
Yeah, I won't be supporting this amendment. We have found in the last couple of years that if it's absolutely necessary that we can go to a contract position or contract support during the any key times of the year. When you hire a full-time position, you have all the ensuing costs and the trailing costs and encumbrances on a year-round basis, whether the position's needed or not. I think we do have an incumbent responsibility, each of us does on the Assembly, to review and understand the budgets and the information in front of us. And at this time, when we all need to be giving up a little something here, I am quite comfortable with the budget that we have proposed and do not support this amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank Mr. Starr for his comment, because he hit it right where it needed to be hit when he said checks and balances. You have a legislative branch of government and an executive branch of government, and this municipality has a lot of finances: general government, utilities, school district. And to rely on the executive branch of government to supply the legislative branch with information, there is no checks and balances. And this is badly, badly needed. And what we've been through in the last few months is just one piece of evidence that supports having somebody help us do our job for the people that live in this community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have conferred with the clerk, and it's her belief that, as stated, that dollar figure $60,000 for IGC's outside general government should actually be moved over to property tax, and so the 120 should all be under property tax under charter, because the 60,000 is already being used for the elections position that we're advertising and interviewing currently.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
So we're using $60,000 from the utilities to support the elections coordinator?
It's advertised, and the interviews are for budget/elections, and we were using the $60,000 from the utilities for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I'm asking if the maker of the motion would be acceptable to changing it that way?
I suppose so, although I'd really like to see the evidence of where the revenue is actually going.
Okay. We'll be happy to provide that. Just can't do it right at the moment. Is that acceptable to the second? Whoever seconded? Mr. Gutierrez, weren't you the
Mr. Coffey's
second?
trying to make up my mind for me. I didn't quite hear what he said. Oh, I was the second.
Is that acceptable?
Yes, that'll be acceptable.
All right. So we're back to this. Dr. Selkirk, you're next.
I'm just wondering, so we're advertising currently for a position that will address elections and budget analysis?
Yes, ma'am.
And so I'm wondering, I guess, to Ms. Drummond, what your thoughts are on that position and why you think, I heard the issue in terms of timing, but are there other issues associated with that position that you think won't work?
Well, if I might, Madam Chair, the previous elections coordinator also had budget analyst in her title, and capable as she was as far as elections are concerned, I didn't discern any evidence that she did any work as a budget analyst, and I fully expect the same out of the current job description that's being advertised. I think we need a full-time budget analyst to serve the 11 members of the Assembly, and hence this motion.
Thank you.
Mr. Coffey.
Well, we've advertised for an elections clerk and a budget analyst half and half, and understand from discussions with the clerk, we're on the verge of making a selection. We're just about there. And now we're going to add another $120,000 to the budget before we even find out what this person is capable or not capable of doing. And I would suggest that we proceed with the plan that we have now and not add another $120,000 to the budget. And if it doesn't, this person is unable to provide us with services, then we can then take a look at whether or not we need a full-time budget analyst or not. Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
Well, when I was Budget and Finance Chair in this body, we did use the coexistence position, and Lupe did supply significant labors to the Budget and Finance Committee process and worked the budget numbers very satisfactory with good direction. So I'm hopeful, as Mr. Coffey said, that you can provide direction to the newly hired, that it's fully disclosed that person will have the co-duties to as directed, support the budgetary functions. Perhaps not in the sense, but, again, I also defer back to, I think that's what the folks that elect us expect from us, is the due diligence of the budgets and the scruffing of the numbers, and I'm more than happy to do it, and I'm more than comfortable relying on the CFO, who's a sworn position at the city level, and that's my comment.
Ms. Johnston?
This is my third budget, and the first budget, we did hire a contractor who helped us both with the municipal budget and with the school district budget. And at that time, it was very helpful because the process was such that we had trouble sometimes discerning the information. One thing that we have now that has developed over this last year is some very good reporting, and I think it's been one that all of us have greatly appreciated and been able to use well. So we don't have to go hunting for our information as much. And this has come out of when it was acting Mayor Matt Clayman, and then it's now been continued and improved with the current administration. In fact, I had an interesting discussion with the Budget Advisory Commission about this because, as you know, we're looking to see what kind of reporting we need so we don't go into the situation we were last fall. And the Budget Advisory Commission actually made a suggestion to take it one step further to help us in our decisions. And they felt that we should color code things. So if things looked like they were not doing well, maybe it would be code yellow. And if they were not doing well at all, they'd be code red. And if they were doing well, it'd be green. And I laughed when I was told that, but actually it made a lot of sense. And if we have that type of reporting, I don't think we really need a budget analyst position to help us. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in queue, I'll put this on the board. If you could please vote.
I don't know what to do.
Is that everyone? And that fails 5-6. Anyone else? 4-6. Well, my board, wait a minute, please. My board is different from, look at this.
Did you have me down for a yes?
We're going to have to revote because my screen shows 5 yays. And that screen didn't. Okay. I don't know how that's possible, but we're going to revote. Let me get rid of that. How do I?
If I change my vote. I'm hovering.
That didn't inspire confidence in the electronic system.
Wait a second. Are we doing it again or not?
Yes, I'm sorry. We have to do it again, I think, because the electronic showed a different vote than the screen.
Okay, let's go.
I'm torn.
Okay.
Fail.
Has everybody voted the correct way, the way they want? No, I mean, it's because it's different than the old screen was. Sorry. Yeah, I'll record it.
Okay, now my screen is the same as that one, 5-6. Thank you. All right, we're back to the main motion. Is there anyone else who has an amendment? Dr. Selkirk, you had an amendment?
Yep. For some reason, there it works.
Go ahead.
I'd like to amend item 19 under library. It's 29 library. It's the last item on the back page.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to strike materials and basically I'd like for materials or services and services. I'd like to add services to that.
Second.
And I would also like to increase it I'd like to increase it, the amount by $50,000, which would make it a total of $125,000. Well, why not?
Mr. Coffey,
both of them, I
just
withdraw
a
my
minute.
second.
Mr. Coffey, you seconded in the middle of her motion, so I'm not going to accept that second.
Okay.
Now, the entire motion is stated is to amend the words and increase the dollar amount.
Correct.
And I'm waiting for a second. And now it is. Mr. Gray Jackson has seconded it. Would you like to speak to it?
I think that the library, I think we've heard a lot of testimony about the library and about the needs of the library, and I think the library plays an important role, and I think the administration's done a really good job in many ways of trying to figure out how to keep the main branch open and make the library accessible. And what this $125,000 is intended to do is to help ensure that we keep the Eagle River and Girdwood branches open. And I think it's not quite enough to do a perfect job in either one of those cases, but it'll allow, I believe, some increased services. And it's my intention to also, when we talk about the utility budgets, to ask ML&P to give a hand with the materials that they need, in which case then more money could be spent on services for those two libraries that are further out from the main branch.
Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Selkirk, for bringing this amendment forward, and I support you in this amendment wholeheartedly. And it's because we spent several evenings here listening to the public come out and talk to us about what they thought was important to maintain the quality of life in this community. And the three things that most folks talked about was bus service, arts, and the library funding. And we did really well so far with bus service. We did not so well with art and not so well with library. So to add another $50,000 to make our libraries a tiny, tiny bit coming closer to whole is just the sensible and responsible thing to do for the people who live in this community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Klayman.
I had a constituent call who asked the question about, during the Great Depression across the country, how many libraries were closed in cities across the country, and the answer is 0. And it was a reminder about how, in times of economic challenge, it's really important for cities to invest in their libraries. And I think this is a good amendment because it will allow a better ability to provide services at the branch libraries, not just Girdwood and Eagle River, but also the Diamond Branch, and hope coming later this year, the Mountain View Branch. And that the branch libraries really do play an important part and an important role for the community, so I'll be pleased to support this amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Johnston?
I will not be supporting this. I've thought a lot about the library, and Mr. Flynn and I discussed the library in great detail. I haven't finished a book yet that's called Jump, but it's an interesting book, and it tells us as far as where technology, it's a history of technology and what happens afterwards, and how we don't really quite know where we're going in this world. But in another year or two, 3 billion people will be on the web. And the average person that's on the web will not be able to read. And we don't know what this information age is going to bring, and we don't know what libraries are going to bring. We don't know if they're going to be museums. We don't know if they're going to be incubators, if they're going to be community centers. I don't think any of us sitting here have a clue. I don't believe that we should not have libraries, and I don't believe we shouldn't fund them. But I'm not sure what this funding going to look like, and I'm not sure what where we're headed. And I know that there's a study going on right now for our libraries, and I'm really interested in what comes out of that study. And I think I'd probably wait until that study to figure out what we're going to be doing as far as adding more funds into the library. I do concerned about the Girdwood and the Eagle River Library, that if there's been discussions that when somebody is sick, there's possibilities that they'd have to close the library because they don't have to librarians there to operate it, and that concerns me, and I hope it doesn't happen. But in the meantime, I think this is another one of those first quarter revisions. I'm content with the $75,000. Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk.
Well, actually, we're not talking about the future of the libraries here. What we're talking about is funding for this year. And we're not talking about whether the libraries are going to have a new identity. The libraries currently have a really valuable identity, and it's recognized in the literature across the country, and that is that they provide a place for people to have access to the World Wide Web that you're talking about. And so in reality, libraries, because they weren't closed in the Great Depression, because they serve as an important link to information that's vital for people to access and have equal rights in the marketplace in terms of ordering things or in terms of applying for jobs. So, and the thing is we're not making the library whole here. We're barely giving it enough to keep Girdwood open. And the reason that they have to close down, I know we're talking about using volunteers, but there are protocols around money, and there are protocols around that we have on the books in terms of how we handle our resources, and we can't have volunteers receiving money. We can't have, we have financial responsibilities that we can't turn over to volunteers. So it's not a lot of money when you look at the whole budget that we're looking at. I don't mean to pick on the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation, but we seem to find, over $200,000, and I'm going to support that for the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. I can't imagine that the libraries have less value than the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. It's just a matter of priorities here, and this is a tiny increase. It could make a big difference in people's ability to access a job or apply for a job or get an application or look up information about an illness. Libraries are playing a really important role in terms of that worldwide net that you're talking about, and this is not a great amount of money, so I really urge a yes vote. It's the right thing to do. I think that this budget in the end, is going to be a thoughtful, frugal budget, and the things we're adding are only going to make it a stronger and better budget. Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do support this amendment. Oftentimes, the two communities in question, Girdwood and Chugiak Eagle River, at the fringes of our municipality, often complain about getting short shrift. And sometimes I chafe at that, and Madam Chair, you and I have had conversations along those lines. But I think in this case, it's warranted. The point was made to me earlier this week that as much as I'd like to see more funding go to the branch library in Muldoon in my district, if something happens there and that library has to close for one reason or another, the Mountain View Library branch is not that far away. The Lusac, for all intents and purposes, is not that far away. If something happens in Girdwood and that library has to close, it's quite a long way to the next nearest branch library. And so I think that in a sense that we're giving those two communities short shrift if we're not taking better care of them. So I do support this amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. This one is approved 8-3. Do we have any more amendments? All right. Seeing no further amendments, the main budget. Oh, Mr. Flynn.
No more amendments. I'm ready to open debate when you are, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, Madam Chair, I want to thank you and the rest of my colleagues for a lot of hard work and a lot of diligence on a very challenging topic. I'd also like to thank the administration, and specifically Ms. Frasca, Ms. Mahoney, and Mr. Baker for their assistance in this process. The budget that you have before you tonight, it has my name on it, but it's not really my budget. It's been said before that budgets are the ultimate public policy document because it decides where taxpayers' resources go and what taxpayers receive in return for those dollars. This budget is a little more challenging than most in that it contains, embedded within it are two very significant public policy choices. The first is the decision to refund debt in order to defer tax payments into the future. I understand the why of it. We're making a bet. We're making a bet that the macroeconomists among us who believe that inflation will be higher in the future means that the dollars we save today will be worth enough tomorrow to cover that bet. If we're wrong, if somehow inflation stays low, we're not going to cover that bet. It's a difficult decision to make, and if you vote for this budget, which I intend to do, you kind of commit yourself to voting for that ordinance that's going to come to us next month. I'm comforted by the fact that this does it for 1 year, not for 2, although that's the overall proposal in front of us that we'll be taking up next October. But it makes me uncomfortable. That said, I've swallowed hard. I've tried to address some of the shortcomings that I felt the budget had when it came to us, and I think we've done a reasonable job in addressing some of those gaps, and therefore I'm going to be okay on that one. The second public policy decision in here is going to have downstream effects as well, and that is the decision to use state dollars for services as opposed to tax relief. Now, the net effect of that is we have a budget that's a little over $10 million underneath the tax cap. The taxpayers aren't saving one dime from that decision this year. They may in future years, depending on how we proceed. But the effect is, whether we like it or not, whatever your philosophy may be, we are further restricting the growth of government than the tax cap would normally do. If you want to see less government, that's a good thing. If you value city services, it's not such a good thing. As Mr. Clayman pointed out earlier, we have a strong mayor form of government. If the administration is dead set at having $10 million under the cap, there's really nothing we can do to stop them because they have line item veto authority. And so again, I've swallowed hard. I've worked to address some of the most critical community priorities, and I think we have done a reasonable job of that here. So I'm voting for this budget, and I do appreciate all the assistance and all the comments we heard from the public and all their ideas and thoughts and concerns and cheerleading and boos and all that stuff. But it's not perfect, and I did my best, and I'm sorry if it wasn't good enough. Thank you.
Ms. Johnston.
Well, since I was the other name on that piece, and I am also voting for this, one of the easiest things to do, I feel, as a public servant is spend money. It's very easy, or it's rather easy. It always makes you feel good because you feel like you're helping somebody, you're doing something of value. I think I've developed this reputation of somebody that doesn't like to spend money. And it's not that I don't like to, but it's something that I feel that we need to as far as developing some kind of fiscal policy. I was very appreciative this year of the fiscal plan that we got from this administration because it said a lot of things that I had felt were true. And fiscal policies, they're not social policies, they're not economic development policies, they're not educational policies, they're fiscal policies, and a fiscal policy is never very pretty. And it never tells a very nice story, but it's usually about as real as you can get, and this one was that. And I do feel that we need to have some restraints in the next couple of years so that we can go back to having a budget that can start growing in a good way, in a way that we will have had really thought about what our wants and needs are and what our needs are and how to best address them without, there's not a program or an ask that comes that isn't good. There's always a lot of needs out there. But you always have to figure out if the needs, as you're addressing those needs, if you're doing it in the right fashion. Are you sending good money after bad, or are you actually making some improvements? And I thought last year, when we were at this point of the budget, one of our assembly people had said to some of the grantees, you didn't get everything you wanted, but come back first quarter. Well, you've heard a lot about first quarter, and I'm going to be very interested in first quarter. I'm going to be interested in how this little compromise budget does in first quarter, and if we meet some of the marks. And I don't feel that we're going to be coming back and asking for more money. I hope we're not, because I think we really do need at this time in our lives to have some fiscal restraint. And I appreciate everybody's help in this. I appreciate the administration. I appreciate Mr. Flynn, and I appreciate the work that Mr. Coffey has done on this. Thank you.
Dr. Selkirk.
Well, I have mixed feelings about this budget. I can tell you I've worked hard on it. I've worked really hard on it, and I appreciate the engagement with the administration, who I believe has also worked hard on this S version. There's been a lot of hard work, and Mr. Coffey and I have wrangled around numbers all week, and this is not the budget I would write, nor, I suppose, is it the budget that the mayor would write. It is a compromise budget, and I would say it's a compromise budget that reflects a conservative spending approach to our community services. And one of the things I think that needs to be said is that this is a growing community, and we are not a poor community. And this budget, no matter how you cut it, is going to have an impact on services. I mean, we start out actually in Anchorage behind in areas in terms of buses and police and librarians and dog catchers or animal control people. We start out behind, and we're going to have fewer. That said, I believe that the amendments that have been made and the S version is a version that it addresses some critical things that need to be addressed in terms of programs that serve people who, in a time when things are hard, need a hand. And so I think in that sense it's a better budget than we started with. I think it's important noting that 59 jobs are going to be lost. And if you just conservatively evaluate the impact of 59 jobs, it's another 1.5 jobs per job we lose. So we're looking at, close to, 280 or two, in terms of the initial jobs, or 180, in terms of the initial jobs and then the impact in the community. So there's going to be a ripple effect from this budget. And ultimately, we are making the decision tonight to do this not because we're in trouble as a community, not because we've got a disastrous situation and we're sliding into oblivion like some communities, but because we don't want to tax ourselves to the cap. And we've elected a mayor who I think really had a mandate when he got here to do the things he's doing. And so we're electing we've elected a mayor, and we're going to be supporting a budget that basically reflects his vision. I think that it'll be an opportunity for this community to evaluate and to get back to the mayor and to this assembly as to whether or not this is really what we want. But I will be supporting the S version. I'm appreciative of the hard work that went into this on the part of Mr. Flynn and Ms. Johnson and Elvie Gray Jackson and Matt Clayman and every other person on this body. I think we've all worked hard on it. I'm not going to list us all. So thanks so much for your fellowship in creating this, and I hope we can live well with it.
Mr. Clayman?
Thank you. I too appreciate the hard work that's been put into the budget. I'm optimistic that a couple of the amendments that were approved by this body will be supported by the mayor and not be subject to his line item veto. Specifically the arts and the additional funding for libraries. I ultimately will not be supporting this budget for three separate reasons. First and foremost is I think we have to be involved in what I believe is wise fiscal policy. And I think that the recommendation that this administration has made, and by exercise of the mayor's veto power, has overridden the interests of this body, and to refund these bonds. And whenever I talk to folks in the community and I ask them about their own management of their own personal finances, I keep coming up with the answer that folks pay their credit cards when they're due. And when I talk to successful business people, they look at ways not to increase their debt load, which is exactly what this refunding proposal does, but actually to figure out ways to decrease the debt load, because that makes you stronger for the future. And so I think the part of this budget that refunds bonds and proposes a bond refunding is a real flaw in this, because what the taxpayer is going to see is their taxes will go up in years ahead because of this decision to put off payment this year, which I think should be paid this year. The second is I think there's a failure to invest in critical public safety personnel. The two amendments I brought forward, both with regard to police and fire, I think that this year we'll save money, but I think in the years ahead we're going to be faced with one of two challenges, either significant cuts in service from our police and fire, or we're going to be looking at large overtime budgets that are going to make it almost impossible to provide that service. I would like to hope that I'm wrong, but because I think I predict I will be accurate in that we're either going to be facing significant overtime or significant service cuts in the public safety function, I think this budget fails to invest properly in the future. And last, I think in terms of facilities maintenance, and particularly some of the street maintenance, I'm very concerned that the loss of positions are going to really impact the community in a very, very negative way. And this was really reinforced over the Thanksgiving Day weekend with snow plowing, in which it wasn't 72 hours, but we had people that were finally getting plowed out 6 and 7 days later. I heard some people in the community that said they did a good job, and others that said, boy, I waited and I waited and I waited, and I saw people in wheelchairs going down the road off the sidewalk. And I see these issues as ones that, again, if we don't make the investment in them today, the community is going to suffer. And because I think the taxpayer would support these investments in the future and investments in today, I'm not going to support the budget. I do appreciate all the work that's been done by the administration as well as the members of the Assembly. Thank you very much.
Mr. Coffey?
Thank you. I think a lot of us have made a lot of efforts to try to bring something to this body that we could agree on. Mr. Klayman has just given us his reasons for not agreeing to those things. I'm going to address the refinancing. The refinancing saves taxpayers $12.5 million in taxes this year, real money this year. The net present value of that cost for 1 year is somewhere in the range of $180,000 when you take over the fact that it's going to be spread over 15 years to recover that. We'll have a chance to revisit this again next year, but I will note this. The property tax levels in this town in 5 years have increased by 36%. This mayor, in an effort to make sure that every department took a little hit, some more than others, and trying to balance the pain, if you would, is proposing a 2.5% increase in real property taxes. If we do what Mr. Klayman would have suggested, our tax rates would have gone up by 13%, again, on top of the 36%. To me, when we have an economy in trouble, and here are the signs of trouble, we've got an unemployment rate that's 30% higher this year than it was at the same time last year. That's a significant number of people. The rate is 30% higher. People are on the margins, on the edges, because things cost more. Their tax bills have gone up, their utilities have gone up, their insurance has gone up, and so on and so forth. And we can't sustain a city on the basis of real property taxes that pay 60% of our budget and expect those folks to continue to see double-digit increases in their tax burden every year when they see nothing like that in the way of their services increasing. Services haven't increased 36% in the last year. Costs have, but not services. So one of the things, and one of the reasons I supported the mayor's budget is because we were faced with a triple hit. One, our revenue from all of our investments fell in the can because of the national economy. Number two, we passed a budget that wasn't sustainable in 2009, and we had to fix that over the course of Mr. Klayman's administration and this administration to the tune of some $26 million. And we signed, as all of us know, and we've heard over and over and over again, we signed very generous union contracts, which are costing us a lot of money each and every year in the order of magnitudes over time of $190 million. Those burdens have substantially stressed our ability to finance the basic services of government. And when we do the things we do, and this budget does, it reflects those facts that we faced. I think we had a period of excess, and I think we are having now a period of retrenchment. The amendments that I voted for were predominantly those designed to protect those who are dependent on some level of public services for transportation and care of their kids, to enable them to continue to work, because I think a person in the workforce is far more beneficial to this society than the costs imposed on us if they're not in the workforce. So I supported the Campfire and the Boys and Girls Clubs, which provide those kinds of services, preschool and after school for working parents, and I supported all of the increases in the buses so people could still get to and from work. I voted against the increase in the arts grants to bring them to the same level as last year. I'm sorry, folks, but I think that if anything should take a hit, but I think they should take a hit concurrent and commensurate with what others have to do. So, with that in mind, I'm going to support the budget because my colleagues voted in those things, and the increase amounts to about $232,000 in a $420 million budget, which is about 0.5%. I don't know what the mayor's going to do with those other increases, but that's going to be up to him. And the things that were voted down, I wanted to make one comment about those. The things that were voted down, to me, they were efforts to sort of stake out positions that didn't make a lot of logical sense. I mean, I saw no reason or legitimacy to the $101.7 million for a police academy when we haven't had the deployment study and we're waiting on hiring a new chief. And I didn't see any sense in the $672,000 for the fire when the chief acknowledged, and I've had discussions about things that make a lot more sense. Some of the other things I have less criticism of, but Ms. Selcraig brought the $109,000 for the safety link, and there's arguments for that kind of thing that make sense and are logical, but Ms. Ingalls said it, you got to prioritize and you got to use your limited resources in ways that work. So I think I know we've had a lot of work, and I know we've had a lot of discussion, and I know we've had a lot of thought given by all of my colleagues in this matter, but we're at a point now where I think I can vote and I can support this thing, even though there are part and parcel of it that I don't like and didn't vote for. But they're minor compared to the benefits achieved by this, and so I will be supportive of the amended budget. Thank you.
Mr. Birch.
I will also be supporting the budget as amended. Obviously, there's some elements of this budget that on an individual basis I wouldn't be supportive of. But I think what we have here is it's really what we look for in an action like this, and that's a compromise. And what this represents is the will and effort and initiative of this full body. And I'd commend the Budget Committee for their effort and initiative and listen to the public, taking into account the concerns voiced, and frankly, the concerns that we heard this last election cycle centered on the high cost of doing business in the city. And I think what we need to do is be attentive to that and identify areas where we can improve city operating efficiency, areas where we can reduce costs and operate and just do business better. And I think this budget's a good solid step along that path, and commend the mayor and his budget staff for their work in this regard, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Mr. Starr?
Well, last year I voted no on the budget. In fact, I voted no on the school district budget as well, and I did it because I had a high level of uncertainty in our ability to pay our bills. And I've had a rough 6 months. I think some of you maybe have seen it. I saw it illustrated to me that we didn't do our job appropriately when the certified financials came out and were given to us in mid-June. And I took it personally for a lot of different reasons. One of them is that we're supposed to watch the funds of the city and appropriate accordingly and keep the city in check and balance. And we didn't do our job on this body. I made accusations to the performance of previous administrations that are painful, that they intentionally misled this body and they withheld deliberate information or deliberately withheld information to our body. Those are uncomfortable statements to make when you're an elected official. It shows that government's not real healthy. I want this budget to be reflective of good study and good work, and I've spent a fair amount of time with some of my fellow Assembly members, and will also ensure that our reporting and our ongoing pulse of the city is managed. I'm not sure I can improve ethics. I'm not sure I can improve integrity or statements of honesty when it comes to asking a question. I will continue to ask questions, and I will expect to get the right answers. And when I don't, I'll try to validate them as best of my skills. And I want to divulge just a minute, because we're patting ourselves on the back pretty solidly here, but last year, it's sort of deja vu for me. We woke up January 1st and we were in debt. We overspent. We had fund balances that were in huge deficient areas. We're not supposed to do that as a government. We have 5 major funds, none of which were in balance at January 1 of this year. I want to ask a question, because I think it's appropriate to put the same question on the record, is what we got from the administration, and I'll run it through the chair as appropriate, but this is probably to the CFO currently. About 2.5 weeks ago, we got a fund balance forecast, and it indicated to us several things. One of them is that we've done a nice job recovering those fund balances. We had to post almost $12 million worth of adjustments last year, and now what I understand is we still have, of our 2 major measuring sticks, the 1 to 2 to 3%, whichever way you want to talk about it, we're going to be at a 1.8, give or take, a 1.8% of our emergency reserves, and our fund balance of the 8.25 as mandated by this body's policy statement will remain healthy. What's the administration's response to that expectation?
Through the chair. Since we distributed the last fund balance forecast, OMB director and I have become aware of some impacts to fund balance. The impacts at this point are $2.5 million. An AIM has been submitted through PACE, and it will be presented to this group on the 15th that discusses the $2 million reduction in revenues. There is an additional $500,000 of interest expense that we are still discussing internally in regard to the treatment of that from an accounting perspective. While we haven't gathered all the facts yet in terms of how we are going to proceed on that, we will be presenting to you a recommendation as to how to appropriate that money here very soon. Considering both of those events, and by the way, both of these events we just became aware of within the last 2 weeks as a result of our revenue forecasting meetings that we have on a monthly basis. Considering both of those transactions, we will probably not be at the 1.8% in terms of the emergency reserve that I had presented and forecasted earlier, but I do, on a preliminary basis, estimate that we will be just a little bit above 1%. So I would expect, depending on where we are first quarter, that we may want to make an adjustment to get the emergency reserve up.
And if I may, through the chair, what about the bond fund, the 8.25% statement? Where are we at with that? Your numbers indicated we had restored that back to somewhere in that range. Is that still
Right.
your take?
Yes, the bond fund would still be at 8.25%.
And I'm not trying to be arrogant or facetious, but I should believe you. Is that, we've got an issue here where the fund balance methodologies, and I've spent, the last couple of weeks trying to work that out, and the comparison between a fund balance report that we got from the previous administration, CFO, and yours. Now I see this. What's the solution for that discussion? How do we know which is right? I don't want to be surprised come January or February.
Well, it's very difficult to forecast costs. The first thing is to establish a methodology that we're comfortable with. And we proved that methodology up by getting a third opinion or second opinion with Northern Economics. So I do feel comfortable in the methodology that we're using. So that's the first step. The second step is to have a process in place that is constantly monitoring costs on a monthly basis, and then to be able to anticipate where we'll be in the future. I mean, we have the controls in place where we're monitoring costs on a monthly basis. We do provide you with reports. We are internally reviewing the reports very carefully and assessing the impact to the budget and to fund balance. So I feel like, we've got the tools in place. As we continue to hone in our skills, we'll only continue to improve.
And the last question, I'm not trying to beat it in. I think it is a pretty good night for our ability to come together as two bodies of government. But what we saw last year, and I'm not quite sure why we were surprised, was significant budgets that hadn't been complied with at year end. We saw overspending in a lot of situations. We knew of the fire department's challenges with their overtime, and a supplemental appropriation came through, but I was startled to see, and I'm using last year only as because this year hasn't closed out yet, I was startled to see the amount of lack of budget compliance. Your reports to us as of a week and a half ago or so with the quarterlies indicate to us pretty solid budget compliance to actuals. Are we seeing significant blowing of the budgets, or do you forecast that between now and the end of the year that we would also have to make up at first quarter?
The two significant areas that are not in the budget are what I just discussed, the under-reporting or the under-receiving of revenue and the $500,000 interest expense. Those are the significant areas. I'm not aware of anything else. But I would ask Ms. Frasca to comment on that.
Well, just department by department. My specific question was department by department. You feel pretty good with the revised compliant budgets. We're not going to get this January surprise that, oh, by the way, somebody blew their budget by $1 million. Is that?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. I'm pleased to support the budget and hope we can keep it going. Thank you.
Excuse me. Mr. Gutierrez?
Forgive me, I fell asleep at the switch. I'm going to be a yes vote on this budget tonight. That doesn't mean I don't have some concerns. Some of those have already been articulated. I am concerned about the bond refunding. I'm not sure that's a wise idea. I am very concerned about the idea of using the one-time money that is the state revenue sharing money. Heaven help us if it dries up and goes away somewhere. I am very happy to thank a lot of different assembly members, Ms. Johnston, Mr. Flynn, and others for all the work that they put in on this. This is, I thought as an employee of the municipality in the past, I thought I had a grip on just how much work goes into the budget, and this year really changed my perspective on that. There was so much work that I think most folks will never see that it's actually been a very interesting experience. I like to think that, let me put it this way, I know where we're trying to go with this budget. I know where the mayor's trying to go. I'm not sure that it quite gets us there. Looking at the original proposal, I'm an average guy. I have an average house. I don't own the Taj Mahal. I live in a middle-class neighborhood. I think my house is assessed by the municipality somewhere around $265,000. This budget, as opposed to taxing all the way to the cap, is going to save me somewhere around $8 a month. And for that, we're not hiring new police officers this year. We're not hiring new firefighters this year. We're doing away with the Safety Link program that helps prevent homelessness and domestic violence, although I know we are doing some other things in a different area with federal money, and very happy to hear about that. Are the loss in services that we're going to get worth $8 a month? To me, I'm not sure. I mean, if I owned a $500,000 house, double that. If I owned a few $1 million worth of commercial property, maybe. I don't know what the calculation would be in my savings. But in my modest corner of the woods, it's $8 a month. Now, that's a couple of lattes a month. And, that's a few dollars more I can throw into local businesses, which is great. But we've also reduced arts funding, and the arts pump $15 to $17 million a year into our local economy, and I'm not sure that's a good thing to cut out either. Neither, I think, the bond refinancing or refunding nor the state revenue sharing issues are closed issues. I know the mayor is going to have to come back to us with an ordinance on the bond refunding, and it does save us money this year. It costs us more money in future years, but that might be worth it. It certainly might be worth it to increase our long-term debt in order to save a couple more bucks off the top this year. So for the moment, I'm supporting this budget. I don't want that to be construed as an assent on the bond refunding, although I may ultimately go along with that. But a lot of work has gone into this, and I think it's a good budget, and perhaps not perfect, and I don't know that any budget ever has been perfect. So we'll see how it goes from there. Madam Chair, I had one more point, and it has completely escaped me at this moment, so I think I'm just going to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sitting at this dais and folks in the auditorium and on TV watching the assembly, for me personally, it's really important to say what I need to say and not what I have to say. So I'm not going to waste a lot of your time because my colleagues, in particular Mr. Flynn, Mr. Klayman, and Mr. Gutierrez, have said what I need to say. And I agree with them wholeheartedly in terms of the bond refinancing, tax into the cap, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the one last thing that I need to say is I want to thank Jennifer Johnson for her role as the budget chair during this budget process, and thank her for her work along with Mr. Flynn and the other colleagues who were present at our posted and informal meetings to help us get through this process. Am I happy with the budget that's in front of me? No, I'm not. But I do realize that we need to move on, and we need to have a budget in place so that we can begin to provide the services for the people that live in this community, and at the same time wish our employees well who are going to get laid off notices tomorrow. And just remember, these people who getting laid off tomorrow are the people that provide the services for this community. And when you have less employees providing services, you're going to get less services, so be prepared. With that said, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I see no one else in queue, so I'm going to put this vote on the board. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I want to just say a couple words. First and foremost, having sat through 9 budget processes on the Assembly, comparatively speaking, this was actually fairly seamless, if you can believe that. I remember days when we had literally 6 different colored sheets of dozens and dozens of amendments, and so I appreciate all the hard work that Patrick Flynn, Jennifer Johnston, Dan Coffey, and others put into getting a document together that does reach a consensus. And in those 9 years, there was never a budget that satisfied everybody, not once. But in the spirit of cooperation, somehow it comes together, and that's the way the process is supposed to work. So appreciate all the Assembly members, and certainly my staff, Cheryl Frasca and her group at Office of Management and Budget, and my whole team, really, all the department heads have worked so hard to do really a nonstop process from the day we got into office, finding $9 million in savings for 2009 to balance this budget, immediately starting preparations for 2010, and then making a plan that gets the fiscal health of the city restored. So they've been working really, really hard on this, and to all of them, most of them are here today. I thank you so much for what you've done, because you got the city back on a good track to getting the fiscal health restored, and it's so important because we don't want to be going through this year after year after year. If we're not proactive now, that's exactly what we will be doing. So, our commitment was, as was mentioned, to obviously public safety first. As was mentioned, the police and fire budgets increased 7% and 10% respectively. That is a commitment to public safety. Can we do everything in public safety we would like this year or next year? Probably not. But those budgets, saw increases and not decreases. And we did not cut frontline personnel. We were able to stop the rolling closures of apparatus. So I think we met our key obligations to our public safety team. Obviously, they felt some pain like a lot of departments did. But, again, I salute our chiefs for their hard work.
This is really just the beginning, folks. I just want to remind everybody that if you read your 6-year fiscal plan, what we identified in there is a 2-year plan, and this is just stage 1. And what the fiscal plan, I think, identified, and I think it is unassailable that it identified a very real, a very clear fiscal gap between our expenditures going forward and our revenues going forward, even if we tax to the cap. And I've yet to hear anybody, really, I guess, put those assumptions to any sort of a critical test that proves them wrong. In fact, what we did is we went to Northern Economics, an independent, highly rated economics firm, and said, where are we with these assumptions? Are we on track? And they said, you're right on track. And so that gives us not only the confidence that what we're doing is in the good interest of the city and are the right moves, but we hope it gives credibility with our assembly and with the public out there that we're doing these things for a reason, not because it's my intent or a philosophy, but it's reality. It's absolute reality, Dr. Selcraig, that we have to do these things because your budget has to balance. And so when we talk about things like, gosh, should we tax to the cap this year, our 2-year plan requires cuts this year and next year. And as I've mentioned before, anything that's added this year just means next year has bigger cuts. Will we get lucky next year and will investments do better? Will bed tax do better? Hey, maybe. We might get lucky. Instead of cutting $25 million next year, maybe we see improvement of $4 or $5 million in our revenue stream. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. That's still significant cuts that have to be made next year to restore the fiscal health of the city. So I just caution folks, it sounds like, gosh, you're not taxing to the cap, you're really robbing folks of services. Adding that spending this year just means cuts next year. I mean, that's the bottom line, no matter where the revenue source comes from. So that being said, and just a final note on revenue sharing. If you remember in our fiscal plan, Mr. Gutierrez, we phase out revenue sharing over a 3-year period. We don't count on revenue sharing after 2012 because the state legislature has essentially set a pot of money aside which at least has 3 years revenue sharing contained in it. And if oil prices stay at a certain level, maybe even longer. But we're not assuming longer. We're assuming 3 years only. And that's a pretty good guarantee based on the formula that they set. So we're projecting outwards that we won't count on revenue sharing from 2013 on. So I think we took that into account. So again, folks, thank you for all your hard work, staff, assembly, and Madam Chair, for your great job as chair in getting us through this process. I think you've done a yeoman's job, and I appreciate that. So with that, obviously I urge passage and look forward to working with everybody. Really, we'll start right away looking towards 2011. And what our goal is, somebody asked me one time, why more cuts in 2011 than 2010? We think by 2011, having the whole year in front of us now, to look at management changes. Can we do things better? Can we reorganize, restructure? So it's not just simply a matter of telling departments, hey, find 3% or 5%. We want to look at structural improvements. We want to look at performance-based government. We want to find ways to do things better and not just sit here and have to bring out a red pen and cut budgets. So, again, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate a yes vote.
Please vote. That budget is approved.
Madam Chair, move immediate reconsideration. Urge a no vote.
Immediate reconsideration has been urged, and I'm trying to get the screen up.
Ye of little faith.
Can you fix it?
Should be ready.
It's not. All right. Immediate reconsideration has been.
Mr. Clayman, Ms. Gray Jackson.
This is on reconsideration. And reconsideration is not approved, so we don't have to do this all over again right now.
Amen.
You're in practice.
All right, thank you. That is one of the items on our agenda tonight.
We have a brief stand down.
There's been a request for at ease. Is that right, Mr.? Yes. All right, 5 minute? 5 minute at ease. Capital Improvement Program. All right, thank you. Now, let me double check. There is not an S version for this one, is that correct? That is, No S version. All right. To the administration before we start, are there any amendments that you need to present to us? There are not. All right. This budget is open for discussion. Dr. Selkirk? Oh, I'm sorry, just a moment. Ms. Gray Jackson was first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Everyone should have somewhere around you a package of amendments, and I'm addressing mine, of course. And my first amendment is the Anchorage Parks and Recreation Department. Madam Chair, I want to move to add a brand-new project, and it is funding from the state in the amount of $75,000 for an accessible park. I don't want to read all this information that's in front of you, but I just want to say that in August, actually in June, some constituents approached me, and they were very sad that their children who had disabilities, wheelchairs, and crutches, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clayman.
That was Mr. Gutierrez.
Oh, that was Mr. Gutierrez? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Anyway, they were concerned because this community did not and does not have an accessible park. And so we had a couple of meetings, and long story short, in August there was a press conference launching a fundraising drive, because these mothers, there were mothers who were adamant about raising money so that we could have an accessible park in this community. And the location of the park, which is where we held the press conference, will be at the Cuddy Park. There's an area already set aside for a park. The Anchorage Park Foundation has about $150 in place, I believe. These parents, they have a website where you can donate to help them raise the money they need. They anticipate raising about $150,000, and I made my contribution, by the way. And this request is supported by Senator Ellis, who was at the press conference. Mayor Sullivan was also there, and it's supported by Representative Gardner and Representative Les Gara. And I know that if we add this $75 state request, that our legislators are going to work really, really hard to help us get there, because it is a definitely worthwhile project. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just a minute, I'm trying to catch up here, but Dr. Selkirk?
No, I withdraw. There's no second on the board. Did you push the button?
All right, this is for amendment for budget for AR 242. All right. No, I'm just trying to, I was thinking I had 117 in front of me. I apologize. All right. Ms. Gray Jackson's amendment is before us. It has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Is there objection? Seeing none, that amendment is approved.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is one other amendment, but I've had meetings with the administration since, and I find no need to move this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Selkirk.
I believe you all have an amendment before you regarding Pine Street and 4th. It's under it's a project management and engineering. Pine Street and 4th is a pretty major construction I'd like to move the Pine Street, and I'm being advised here, thank you. I'd like to move the Pine Street and 4th area storm reconstruction at DeBar and Boniface from 2011 to 2010 in the capital improvement budget.
Do you want to state the dollar amount too, ma'am?
Yes, and the amount is $3,200,000.
Thank you. And Mr. Starr was the second.
Thank you, Mr.
Would you like
Starr.
to speak to that? I'm sorry.
Yes, this project is really needed. This existing storm drain looks like it may fail, and there's a school nearby, and I was contacted by people in the neighborhood, and then I checked with project management. They were, I think, pleased to hear that this might be moved forward. I gave the heads up to the administration, and I haven't actually heard back from them specifically, but would somebody from the administration like to comment on this? Mr. Lamson, do you have a comment?
We have no objection. It's a good idea.
Thanks.
All right. Is there any further discussion on this amendment? Mr. Starr? A different one? All right. Is there objection to this amendment? Hearing and seeing none, this amendment is approved. Mr. Starr?
Yeah, I've got a few of them here to move and appropriate to probably go line by line.
Actually, point of order, Madam Chair.
State your point, sir.
Just a little bit of confusion because I know this item is the capital improvement plan or capital improvement program, and the next item on the agenda is the capital improvement budget.
Yes, sir.
And are we going to have to basically go through the step with both of them?
Well, that's kind of what was hanging me up at the beginning, but my understanding is we just do it here.
In the budget.
Ms. Frasca, could you
I'd actually like
that?
some clarification because I'm confused.
All right. Could you generally speak about how 117 interacts with 242?
Well, as you make changes to AO 2009-117 to change.
We can't hear you, ma'am.
As you make changes to the 2010 projects, those would then get reflected in the 2010 through 2015 program.
But we're specifically dealing with the 6-year one now.
Oh, I'm sorry. 242, okay.
Madam Chair, if I could
So
ask.
as you make changes that reflect 2010, then you still need to make the changes to 2010 or embrace them.
Mr. Kleiman?
My question would it be easier, Ms. Frasca, from a procedural standpoint for us to change the order of the day and make amendments to the capital budget, and then so we should actually be doing these amendments to the budget and not to the plan or the program, I think it's called. I see you nodding. And then after that, we wouldn't need to make a motion, or we could just move to incorporate them into the program based on what amendments were made to the budget.
If I can briefly intercede here, Madam Chair, Mr. Clayman, as you review, for example, some of Ms. Ray Jackson's and Mr. Starr's other amendments, you'll note they're multi-year. And so I think we're best off incorporating these changes into the 2010 through 2015 CIP, and then whichever ones we approve, we can approve by reference when we take up the 2010 capital improvement budget.
And Mr. President, your point is exactly what held me up at the beginning when I was asking for the moment to figure this out, because I had in my head we would do the 117 first. But I think it's a good point, because some of these motions do move projects from year to year.
What I would suggest is, and I'm happy to make the motion, is to change the order of the day, take up the budget first, and then we can take up the plan ones that are multi-year after we've done the budget ones, and that may simplify life. But if the chair wants to go forward this way, we'll do what you want.
I think it might be simplest to just continue this,
Okay.
because we're in the middle of it, and we've done 2 of them already.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Ms.
Can I make one comment? Thank you, Madam Chair. I just need to clarify something. This spreadsheet that has all the capital budget amendments from the Assembly on them, there's some typos, because the only 2 that were mine were the first 2. The next 3 are not mine. I just needed to clarify that.
And there also are several others that aren't on that list, I've discovered, if I'm correct.
Right, but my point is that the ones on the list that start with traffic calming are not my amendments. The ones on the sheets that the clerk passed out are the correct order. And I just wanted to make a point. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I'm sorry, you've confused me, Ms. Gray Jackson. You're talking about this sheet here.
Madam Chair, yes, that's the sheet I'm talking about.
Oh, you meant you were not the sponsor. Okay.
Thank you.
I understand now. Thank you.
Thank you. I got it.
All right. I believe, Mr. Starr, you were about to make an amendment.
Well, I was. I thought I had it figured out. I was just a little unclear because I was just going to do the program year changes now and then hit the budget later. So I concur with Mr. Clayman's strategy, but, I've got two amendments that affect year only, no money. So what I was told by the administration before was that if you moved the budget item, it would automatically reflect over into the program. But
That's what I thought.
Well, I apologize.
I just don't want to make sausage here, but I don't want to miss something either.
We should have clarified this before we started, and I didn't take enough time to do that. I apologize. To the administration, my memory of this is that we've done just first the 1 year and then the multi-years in the past. At this point, it's a little tricky, I think, for us to switch gears and go to the separate budget. Both Mr. Clayman and Mr. Starr, though, make valid points. Procedurally, if we go ahead and continue as we have been with 242, do you have a process where you can fairly simplistically help us deal with 117? She asked, hopefully.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Thank you. And I should have forecast this difficulty. I apologize to you all. I didn't. All right. I'm sorry, but we're going to continue with 242, and we're going to just ask the administration to help us with 117. So, Mr. Starr.
Well, through the chair, then, do you want me to move on a revised sheet here? I've got 7 of them. Do you want me to move them all under the program?
Yes. I would suggest so, because some of yours, Mr. Starr, have years to them beyond 2010.
I get it. Do you want me to move them one at a time, or can I move them in mass?
I think you can move them in mass.
It's as long as everybody has the same document sheet. It's a gray and whited sheet, not the listing that Ms. Gray Jackson was referring to. But
then no, I do not, sir. I only have the listing.
I don't have it.
I just need to clarify that they're the same. I didn't do that because I had another revised sheet that was.
I'm just going to get you. Can we get copies of that?
Yeah, why don't I get out of the queue, make copies for everybody, and just move them in mass? It's going to be a lot more timely to make 10 copies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Starr. Dr. Selcraig, you're back in queue. Dr. Selcraig, did you want to speak?
Just for clarification, I assume that the item I just added to the program, I will also need to add to the budget.
Yes, but we're going to rely on the administration to help us through that after we finish 242.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Clayman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to amend, at this point, the program to move the Sand Lake ambulance the Sand Lake ambulance bond from 2011 to 2010. And it also calls for adding funding for O&M after the fire academy is completed and the rig is staffed. And this doesn't require purchasing in 2010, it just makes the funds available.
Second.
Oh, I forgot to hit motion.
Thank you both for putting that in the board. All right, would you like to discuss it further?
Just briefly, this has been a primary concern from the Sand Lake Community Council and the Sand Lake community for several years. The number of senior care facilities, both kind of the private facilities where they'll have 3 or 4 elderly folks living in a home, as well as some of the larger facilities in the Sand Lake area, are growing. And I know when I've done ride-alongs on the Spenard ambulance, it seems like they spend the better part of their time going around Sand Lake, taking care of people, many of whom are in these senior communities. And so this really presents a pressing need for that part of the community. By putting it into the budget now, it doesn't mean we'll go out and buy the ambulance next month or a month after the bond passes. It just puts us in a position so that as soon as we have the staffing to man that ambulance, we can buy it, and it wouldn't require waiting until 2011 and have it considered by the voters at that much later date. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, I'm assuming you'll chime in if you have a comment on any of these. All right. Is there further discussion on the ambulance? Is there opposition to the ambulance? Seeing none, that's incorporated. All right. Anything else, Mr. Clayman? All right. Mr. Starr, I think we've got the grayed out sheet now.
I'd like to move, they're not numbered, but it looks like there's 7 amendments on the attached document. I'd like to move those en masse.
All right, those are before us. Mr. Starr, do you want to discuss it at all?
Well, just a couple. There's a mandate and a responsibility that I have and Ms. Osiander has, and that's to report and respond to our road board, we call it. The SBRSA Combined Road Board is a collective body that brings forth action, work plans, budgets of their own, as well as they also apply directly for grants outside of our budget process here. So these are actually items, there's only one on here that isn't been affirmed at the road board level, so I can move those six. There's one that I want to speak to, and that's deleting the Yosemite Drive area drainage. That falls outside of the road board affirmation process, but that one in the Yosemite Drive area, there is a $350,000 drainage study being conducted at this point, so I have no basis for moving a $2 million drainage project until we get the results of that drainage study. So 6 of these are supported requests by our road board group, and one of them in the middle for the $2 million reduction is mine, standalone. So I'd urge support, but also urge dialogue and debate on the Eklutna Bridge as appropriate. So that's all.
Thank you. Is there, if you're in queue, I'm going to assume you want to speak to this amendment. So, Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I'm clear here, Mr. Starr, you're asking that page number 4, line 2, and page number 15, line 5 be added to our legislative program. Is that correct? Am I missing any that you want to add?
Well, line 4 is already in the legislative program, but the amount is different. It's already in the legislative program as $1 million request, with the idea that the SBRSA group would pick up $320,000 of that. They've since decided that they want to put that off onto the whole state appropriation system if funding is available and approved for the full 300 or the 1.32.
I think we have that one already, but I'll double check. So page 4 and page 15 are the two. You need to correct the amount to page 4 and add page 15. Is that correct?
Could we
most likely, I don't know the answer to that. I haven't fleshed the legislative draft book out.
I'll get with Ms. Schubert. We're going to try.
But I hope that's the case.
Here, so.
Yeah, that's not specifically germane to this amendment, but I appreciate the discussion.
Well, the $6.5 million bridge is a new item. So
okay.
It says legislative program, and that means we got to.
I understand, but the amendment itself, you understand, does not do that. Correct?
That's my point.
Thank you. Mr. Starr, I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, you didn't. I just trying to urge debate on the Eklutna Bridge to see where the body's at.
Dr. Selkrig, you're next.
I'd just like some clarification, and actually the Eklutna Bridge did catch my eye, and I wondered if Mr. Wilbur could come up and answer some questions. I just want to clarify the implications of approving this budget revision or this set of amendments in terms of its impact on the whole system, and if it does impact other projects. And I recognize that this relies on state monies. Is that correct? And that's the intention, right?
Yeah, through the chair, this request is for all to fund it through with state funds for Eklutna River Bridge replacement.
So my question is it assumed that these are additional state funds that we're going to receive beyond what we are anticipating getting from the state? Or are these going to displace projects that we've got in the plan that, based on our assumptions about the monies we'll be receiving? What's the strategy for the funding? Mr. Starr, maybe you can help that.
Well, they're not in AMATs, I'll tell you that. We're not fighting for those sort of funds, so it's a new item to the legislative plan.
So that's it. And so assuming that they aren't funded at a state level, then we're not building them. It's that simple, right?
Precisely right. In fact, we're asking it to be funded at $6.5 million from the state as a line item.
Right.
It's not included as a package road project listing or anything like that.
Okay. I haven't seen it before, and I just want to understand it.
Yep.
And then the second thing is there's the $6.5 million for the Eklutna Bridge. Will that cover the entire cost of the bridge?
Through the chair, I would yield to project management and engineering as the estimate has come from their department.
Through the chair, that's our best guess right now. It's been about 5 years since we've done any detailed engineering work at it, but I talked with the project manager and they thought that's a reasonable request.
Okay, it doesn't seem like enough from all the road projects I've ever looked at. I mean, but I'm not the expert. Okay, thank you very much. That answers my questions.
Is there any further discussion on these amendments? Hearing and seeing none, is there any objection to approval of these amendments? I ask if there's any objection to approval of these amendments. Seeing,
I have some concerns about the Eklutna River Bridge, just because it's kind of brand new, and it seems to me it might be. It would be great. Am I going to hear from the chair on this? Thank you very much.
Ms. Osiander.
this is a bridge that is on the Old Glen Highway, right below Thunderbird Falls.
Right, I know.
And it is a bridge that the state bridge inspector declared, I don't know if the correct word is unsafe, but they basically said that it should be replaced. As such, our road district stopped maintaining it. And it's been very controversial within the road board because it's such a big, expensive item. And initially, the state was asking for a local match for the bridge. And the road district has such little money that they didn't want to put a big match in. The direction, as I understood it now, is they're just going to ask for it all from the state in hopes of getting it. It's a significant bridge to people who live in Thunderbird Heights. That's their main egress and ingress. Egress? Yeah, into their neighborhood. Its main function for the rest of the community is it's on a road that parallels the Glen Highway, a frontage road. It's been the top project for the Chugiak Community Council for a long period of time, but it's hard for the rest of the district to swallow because the cost is so high.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, that clarifies my concerns.
Is there anyone else? Is there any objection? Hearing and seeing none, those amendments are approved. Anyone else?
Ms. Drummond, did you have an amendment?
Actually, I'm going to not bring forward the traffic calming amendment. I'm understanding that the traffic calming department has plenty of projects that will take it through next summer, and they don't need any additional funding. Is that true?
That's correct, Ms. Drummond.
All right. At this point, seeing no further amendments to this budget, I'm going to ask if there is objection to approval of AR 242 as amended. Hearing and seeing no objections, AR 242 as amended is approved unanimously. Mr. Klayman, did you have a point?
I'd move for immediate reconsideration and urge a no vote.
All right. Immediate reconsideration has been urged. And I can't put it on the board. Ms. Gray Jackson was the second, weren't you? Mr. Klayman was the main. Okay, very good.
She just misspoke. I think you referred to this as the budget. It's the program.
It's 242.
Right. I just wanted.
Not to be confused with a car.
Thank you. A reconsideration has been moved. A no vote has been urged. Please vote.
Mr. Coffey?
He's not here.
Mr. Starr? Did you?
No.
Yeah, it's just Mr.
All right. Reconsideration failed.
Wait.
Huh?
That's why I asked you. All right. Is there objection to reflecting Mr. Starr as a no?
No.
Yes.
I think I'm going to overrule you, Mr. Flynn, and reflect that was a 10 no. I also would like to note the body. Mr. Coffey is feeling ill and is asked to be excused and won't be with us for the rest of the evening. All right. Now, we're at 1:17, and I'm hoping there'll be some administrative support in dealing with this, but a motion would be in order for once.
Move to approve.
On the board.
All right, 117 is before us.
A little guidance on the motion. I'll make the appropriate confirmation motion. Anything? Just go for it. Okay. I will move that we amend 117 to reflect the 2010 changes in the CIP we previously made to 242.
Second.
All right, to the administration, is that an appropriate motion that you can fulfill?
Legal, any concerns with that motion? Oh, we have no legal. Julia?
Mr. Witherstick, too.
We think that satisfies
All right.
requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, is there any discussion on that amendment? Is there any objection to that amendment?
I just had one question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Klayman.
As I understand it, this means the amendments to the program that affect future years will not be incorporated in the budget for 2010, but anything that affects 2010 will be incorporated into the budget for 2010.
That's certainly my understanding.
Okay,
Yes.
with that understanding, I have nothing else.
And I'll confirm with the administration, that Ms. Frasca is nodding her head yes. That is her understanding. Thank you, as is the mayor. All right. Is there objection to that amendment? Hearing and seeing none, that amendment is approved unanimously. Are there any additional amendments?
I would move for immediate reconsideration.
Just a minute.
Oh,
We
I'm
haven't
sorry.
approved it yet, sir. All right. Seeing no further amendments, 117 as amended is before us. Is there discussion? Is there objection to approval? Hearing and seeing none, 117 is approved as amended, and thank you to the
Madam
administration.
Chair.
Now,
Madam Chair, move immediate reconsideration, urge a no vote.
all right, and I'm waiting for a second for that. And Ms. Gray Jackson was a second. Thank you. All right, I'm waiting for the board to clear.
It's coming right there. Okay.
All right, reconsideration has been moved. Please vote.
Mr. Birch, Dr. Selcraig, Mr. Klayman, Ms. Gray Jackson, Dr. Selkirk, there.
All right. Reconsideration is not approved. That budget is upheld. All right. The next item before us is 118.
Madam Chair, I'll move the S version of 118, the
Thank you, Mr.
Facilities Enterprise Activity Budgets.
And who was the second? Thank you. Mr. Klayman was the second. All right. Those 118S is before us. Are there discussion or amendments? Dr. Selcraig, I think you said you had one?
Yes, and I'm looking for.
Well, while you're looking, we could do some others if you.
Actually, I have an amendment. I'll pass this out, and then I've got.
All right. While she's passing it out, just for your information, Ms. Drummond shared with me a sheet that she had that included some amendments from the administration, and I checked with Ms. Frasca, and they're incorporated in the S version already, so we don't need to worry about them. Okay, Dr. Selcraig.
This amendment has grown out of discussion. I'd like to move the amendment that's before us. It's under section 4, page 2, and it states, in making contributions to outside organizations, including those identified as the Port of Anchorage contributions to outside organizations in the amount of $41,000, solid waste services, other expenses of $163,000, municipal light and power community-based expenses of $350,000, and water and wastewater authorities in the amount of $50,000. The respected municipal utilities and enterprise activity boards and executive management teams are requested and encouraged to consider the Library Foundation and the applicants under the Municipal Community Development Grant Program. And then it goes on to say, Section 5, Number 4, this ordinance shall take into effect immediately upon the passage and approval of the Assembly. The intention here is really just to request that those boards, as they're allocating community service monies, take into consideration the municipal community development grant programs. Some of those programs we haven't funded fully, or some of those programs didn't get funded. And also to take into consideration providing funding for the Library Foundation in hopes that they could make funds available for materials. And so it's not a mandate, it's simply asking them to consider that, these things as they evaluate the community service grants they have. And I do want to note that these utilities usually fund things based on their service areas, and I think that's still appropriate. They can look at that list and see if there are things on that service area, in their service areas that apply. I have reviewed it with Mr. Posey, and I ran it by ML&P. I ran it by Mark Primo, and I think that basically it just asks their board and their administration to consider this. Thanks.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment?
Is there a second?
And could you put on the board, please, both the maker and the second? I don't remember who the second was.
There was one.
Will you second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. I apologize. I thought it had been seconded already. Mr. Klayman, do you want to speak to it?
I just wanted to query either for Assembly Council or for the municipal attorney. All of these are boards that these are enterprise operations that have independent boards that exercise their independent authority in terms of distributing funds. Is there any chance they would see this as unduly interfering with their independent authority if we vote yes on this?
The administration? Whoever you want to answer that, Mr. Mayor?
Because of the language just being suggestive, we don't think that would probably prohibit boards from acting differently if they so chose. But, I mean, Dr. Selkirk is just basically suggesting these are good areas to invest in, and we're okay with that.
I was actually directing the question to the municipal attorney and see if they had any.
Oh, I apologize.
I appreciate the mayor's view, but I also wanted to hear whether they thought that it might constitute any undue interference.
Through the chair, Senator Klayman, I agree with my good counsel to the right of me. Honestly,
it's always, Mr. Wheeler, I always recognize it's important that when the client makes a decision, if it can be supported, you should advocate on behalf of your client,
exactly.
And I recognize your good advocacy.
As Ms. Tucker was just reminding me, obviously the Assembly has control over these budgets, so these boards are not entirely free to act as they desire. But nevertheless, the provisions that are being added here are requests and not mandates. And therefore, the boards are not compelled to make expenditures under this provision.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Klayman?
Given that, I would actually add one or other word, or one other, or add the phrase after the Library Foundation, add comma, arts and cultural programs, comma.
Just a minute, Dr. Selkirk. You'll be next on the list when he's done. So
we'll just add the phrase arts and cultural organizations.
Mr. Klayman, it doesn't appear you've got a second.
Oh, sorry. So the sentence would read, the respective municipal utilities, et cetera, are requested and encouraged to consider the Library Foundation, comma, arts and cultural organizations, comma, and applicants under the municipal's community development grant program.
Have you ever written out?
What's that?
You ever written out?
I'm writing it.
Well,
I have it if you can read it.
We need his writing.
All right. Dr. Selkirk.
I believe that the arts and cultures are already listed as part of the community development grant program applicants. That's why I didn't pull it out. I mean, I'm happy to pull it out, but I believe it's at the top of the list, and I think it's in, the request is what, 200 and, it's on that list.
Would you like to confirm that with the administration, Dr. Selkirk?
Does anybody have that community list? So it's included in the list. I don't believe the Library Foundation is, I don't think the Library Foundation is on that list, and that's why I added it.
Thank you. Would you like to continue with the amendment?
In light of that, I'm comfortable with I'll withdraw the amendment.
Is that all right with you? Mr. Flynn is the second. Does the Assembly object to withdrawal of that amendment? Seeing no objection, that amendment is withdrawn. And Dr. Selkirk's amendment is back before us. Is there any further discussion on Dr. Selkirk's amendment? Is there any objection to it? Seeing none, it is approved unanimously, and we are back then to 118S as amended. Are there any additional amendments or discussion on 118S? Hearing and seeing none, is there any objection to approval of 118S as amended? Hearing and seeing none, 118S is approved unanimously. We are now at this point, there's been no.
You want your motion for okay. I'll move to immediate reconsideration and urge a no vote.
Second.
Could you clear the board? Yep, ready. All right, immediate reconsideration has been moved. Please vote. And that motion fails. We will not reconsider this budget. All right, at this time, there's been a request to make some announcements. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is on the Assembly calendar for tomorrow a Public Safety Committee meeting. I'm sorry.
You have the
We have been waiting to take up changes to Title IX, to the traffic code. I'm told that those still are in legal. They're not ready for prime time yet, not ready to be seen. So I would like to inform the body we're canceling tomorrow's meeting. I also, on a related note, want to inform the body that we've had discussions this week with Assembly Council regarding the ID for liquor purchase proposal, and I believe there will be something ready for introduction before this body at our meeting of the 15th of this month, and as soon as that happens, we will immediately take it up at Public Safety and start a public discussion on that topic. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. I'm going to seize this opportunity, too, to talk a little bit about the work sessions this Friday. The port has come to us, Governor Sheffield has come and asked if he could brief us on the activities in the port and how their budget plans are going with the expansion. He's asked for an hour to do that on Friday, and I calendared him from 11 to 12. If you recall, we already had the 12 to 1 o'clock already scheduled for the IT discussion that Dr. Selkirk requested. I know that there are at least 4 Assembly members who are out of town. There's been some discussion that if there are insufficient people, we may cancel these. So I would very much appreciate knowing if you cannot make the work sessions this Friday. Ms. Gray-Jackson cannot. I know Mr. Coffey cannot. I thought there were 4. That's only 2. Ms. Johnston cannot.
I had a conflict, too. But
Mr. Flynn cannot. All right, well,
Madam Chair,
if there's only 4, just a minute, okay. If there's only 4, then I'm going to go ahead.
Okay,
right?
Because I think that it's a shame to have these if we end up with just a few.
I would agree, but 6 people is enough.
Okay.
All right, so just to let you know, 7 people. Yeah, thank you. I'm doing math.
Added 1, lost 1, happened.
All right, so from 11 to 12, we'll be hearing from the port folks, and from 12 to 1, IT. Are there any further announcements that need to be made at this time?
Just a quick reminder, Madam Chair, I haven't seen any amendments except for Mr. Starr's this evening for the legislative program, which I'd asked to be to the clerk by the close of business yesterday.
Well, Mr. Flynn, I think you will have some coming. I have to frankly admit I haven't read it yet, but I will.
Well, sooner than later, please. I guess I'll probably try and put something together for Monday for us the committee to go over them and incorporate them as best we can prior to Tuesday's meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flynn.
Madam Chair, on that topic.
Just a moment.
Let's just make the deadlines Friday, fine, and I'll work on one over the weekend and try and I'll schedule something with the clerk for Monday. Mr. Coffey will be gone, but the rest of us can get together.
Okay. Mr. Flynn is asking to expedite if you have any amendments for the legislative program.
I plan to bring amendments. I don't think I can meet your deadline. I have papers to correct, and I've spent a lot of time on budget, so I'll do my very best, but I do want to give you a heads up that I will have some amendments. I'll do my best to get them to you before Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Selkirk. All right. Seeing no further announcements, a motion would be in order.
Move to adjourn.
Seeing no objection, we are adjourned.
Good job.